Greetings, friends. Welcome to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today we have our friend Tim Bowie from Los Angeles, California. He is a life mastery coach. You can find him at timdinbowie.com/high-performance-humans. Also on Instagram.com at timdinbowie. Spelling and links in the description below. We're going to get right back to him in 2 seconds. Would you kindly like, share, subscribe, tell your friends? Always need more volunteer dreamers, viewers for my game streams, etc. Also, 16 currently available works of historical dream literature. The most recent, Dreams and Their Meanings by Horace G. Hutchinson. Fantastic work from 1901. I hope the definitive edition, heavily footnoted, beautifully recreated by yours truly, your friendly neighborhood dream wizard. All this and more at benjaminthedreamwizard.com. A complete list of all 16 available works. Encyclopedia of dream figures, historical stuff, terminology, etc. And audio MP3 download versions of these interviews. And that's enough about me. Back to Tim. Thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Hey, Benjamin. Thank you so much for having me. Nice to meet you officially.
Yeah, good deal. I know we chat, briefly beforehand to set up a meeting, but it's not like talking to a person, actually interacting. Even though we're not in person, it's this is very much different than text.
Yeah.
You can't see when someone says something that is you lose nuance in text and sarcasm and stuff like that. Because if I said something insulting with a smirk and a wink, you're like, this guy, but if I said it in text, it's like, are you an asshole? What's going on here? I get that.
Yeah, and I can see you're a cat person. It tells me a little about you.
Yeah.
Your cat's good.
Yeah. Well, most of them sleep and then they try to walk on the go. Speaking of the keyboard, I had one episode eaten by a now deceased feline. My boy Prince has left us, but he destroyed episode number 8. Did the whole recording, hour and a half long. Wonderful thing. The guy was really impressed. I think I nailed it. No one will ever hear it. That one disappeared into the ether. Prince took it with him to the grave.
It's a doozy.
It is. It happens. Well, it's one of those life lessons you live and learn. These things happen. Like, I should pay attention that the recording is still functional and the cats have not destroyed it. But let's talk about you. I ramble about myself enough. Life mastery coach. How'd you get into that? What is that? What's the service you provide? I mean, just general broad strokes, elevator pitch, whatever you want to say.
Yeah. So I think that basically, like, the goal for me in life has been to get into flow state as much as possible. So I think that once you get mastery in one area of life, you can actually transfer that mastery to other areas of life, because when you have mastery, you can get into flow very easily. So whether that's writing, whether that's dancing, or for me it was martial arts, I can use my experience of what that feels like, of what that's like. I can apply that to meditation, I can apply it to speaking, I can apply it to writing. I just need to be able to sequence it, chunk it, and then transfer that experience over. So I've been able to do that with various different types of martial arts, and other fields too. So there's basically a formula that I use, and it's based on elemental philosophy. So there's just basically 4 elements, and so each of these elements are sequenced. So you have air, which is technical, mental, timing. And then you have water, which is flow, and whatever the aspects of water are, we could talk about it for a while. Earth, which is structure and grounding and rigidity and boundaries. And then you have fire, which is this emotional aspect, the impact aspect. And then you have the spirit, which is it could be a lot of other things, but or we could call it the void as well, the container of all of them. And so I think once you have a system to experience pretty much everything in an elemental language, then really you have a way to work with things. So I would say my first ayahuasca experience 7 or 8 years ago, you don't really have the language to describe what happens in that type of experience. It is like a dreamlike state.
Oh yeah.
Except if you have I had the elemental language, so I was able to in my mind distill these experiences in an energetic way that I can make sense of the whole experience. Whereas a lot of people, they were just lost, and they just got chewed up and spit out basically, and didn't know which way was up when they were done. So I mean, it's been really beneficial.
Wow, that is very cool. You've hit on some things that I've spent time in my life contemplating, and one of them, I mean, if we kind of start work backwards, start with the most recent. The idea of the elemental thing, that is always, so I've actually got sitting in my file here an idea of a book. I probably have nowhere near your depth of thought in this concept, but it felt to me like a book needed to be written on this idea of applying the five. I consider it like the five elemental strengths of human beings. And I don't know if we have a similar conception specifically or not, but I think broadly it's the same thing. The idea that these things do describe. So there's I went to a Spiral Rhythms Music Fest probably 15 years ago up at a hippie commune in Washington. And there were people around a campfire playing drums as they do. And there was chanting and it was earth, my body, water, my blood, air, my breath, and fire, my spirit. And that just chanting it over and over. I got, if I wasn't stoned already, I would have gotten into a hypnotic, state. Just the chanting of it and the message of it in those ways. Now, you and I may not, or I may not even, both of us may not agree with that specific formulation, but that works as well. But the idea that there are qualities of, like Bruce Lee said, be like water in your motions, in your responses, in your adaptability. There's things about the physical qualities of water. And this relates to dreams as well. The idea that those collective unconscious understandings of how humans interact with physical objects informs how those objects appear in our dreams. So there's almost a dream book style of understanding that can be applied. Water's going to fit certain categories, but then it's always going to be personal, and there's some tweaking and adjusting and refining to get it specifically relevant to you. So anyway, long story short on the whole book idea is that, it's nowhere near development. And actually, I'm thinking of putting together a book series that I want to have other people author. I want to be like the editor, producer of it. And it's a wizard's guide to XYZ, anything. So it could be a wizard's guide to the 5 elemental powers of mankind or something. And you write it and we put it out under my publication on the editorial thing. We share the profits and whatnot. Anyway, just planting that seed. And like, if you ever thought of writing a book, now you can do it on your own. You can publish on Amazon and you don't need me. So go ahead and write your own book. But if you wanted to be part of the Wizard's Guide series, the offer's at least out there for discussion. Have you
My
thought of?
mentors would definitely be interested in. And one of them actually lives not too far. He lives in Oregon as well. So if you guys
Nice.
ever met, I think you guys would have. I'm sure the two of you would just vibe out. Like, you guys have very similar energy. So
Thank you very much. I hope I have that, inquisitive desire to understand and explain correctly.
I think both of you guys would really hit it off. So
Nice.
we'll talk about that offline or something.
Sure. Yeah, no problem. Well, I love the idea that you've connected this also to martial arts. Now, I've always been fascinated with that, and this goes back to my late to mid '80s fascination with the Shaw Brothers kung fu movies coming out of China at the time, and that started a lifelong passion, which inspired the Wu-Tang Clan. So we're in good company there. But and then that broader category of understanding that if you can physically instantiate that flow state, as you were saying, like when we think basketball players, we call being in the zone. They're just doing things that seem superhuman because they've found a channel and they're riding it. And one of the things we struggle with is the idea of how to trigger that, how to do it on purpose. I don't know that I have the answer to that. I think there's a lot of answers suggested by a lot of different people, but one way is definitely to find it in the physical and recreate it in the mental, or vice versa. You were talking about combining these things, or transferable mastery. So is there a way you conceive of that being transferable and how that works? You might not, I don't know, just asking.
Yeah, no, it's like meditation. So meditation is like the cleanest way. It's like kind of learning how to spell, right? And so it's a very fundamental experience, meditation. Like nobody can really tell you what you're experiencing. And so when you have a sense of a certain level of focus, for instance, like they call them jhanas, or like different differentiating degrees of mental states. And then, we can use science and we could say like, oh, this is like a alpha theta state, or this is a gamma state. And so there's some correlation between these jhanas, these levels of concentration and what kind of brainwave states we're in. And so once you have a certain level of mastery in anything and you're in flow, then it can be correlated to a certain brainwave state, or it can be correlated to a genre. I'll stop using that. But basically, once you have mastery, then you know what it feels like. And so once you know what it feels like, if you can start to take the qualitative aspects and then find basically the next step is to find a somatic or internal reference point to recreate that. So through breath work you could do it as well. So like if you basically, there's a couple ways to ground it. So if I'm working with somebody, then it's just like, okay, so like when you're in flow state, what does it feel like? And then we'll talk about it. And then I'm like, okay, so next time you're in it, like where do you feel in your body? And then we could talk about grounding it through the breath. And then once you ground it through the breath, then you can activate it in other contexts. So that's how we do it.
I was considering that too. Is like when I've had those flow states. I mean, one of them goes back to as far back as elementary school playing dodgeball, and I just could not be hit. And I'm right.
Dodgeball's the best.
That was amazing to me because I've always been a chubby bunny, and I've never been
Mhm.
physically talented in that way. I can play drums in, but I can't dance. I mean, my body doesn't move like I can't do sports. It's just not my thing. It's a struggle with that. Even martial arts, I struggled with it. I very much have to understand something intellectually and then try to translate it into the physical. It's like I can't think physically like some people can. It's one of my limits.
Yeah.
But I was in this dodgeball court, and man, I was the first one out in so many games throughout my life. And this one, I had to stop myself and realize everyone is out. And there's like half a dozen people still on the other team. And they're all looking at me like, dude, just end the game so we can start over. And I'm like, okay. So
Nope.
eventually I got it. And that, my autism, like I'm not always aware of social cues and whatnot. And I had to stop and say, I'm keeping, intellectually I had to process it. I'm keeping everybody waiting. Everyone's just out. And I'm the only one here enjoying this game still. So I said, all right, hit me. And I let him throw it. And he threw it, nice guy, threw it gently and it bounced off me and hit the ground. I'm like, game over. But
I just played dodgeball like I think 2 weeks ago, so this is really relevant because I hadn't played it since I was a kid, and I just played it 2 weeks ago. So I think this is super relevant. But yeah, there was a moment like that where my partner, she was the last person in, but everybody was like chanting her name, like Jonah, Jonah, and then she was going. But it was too much pressure for her. But she
uh,
felt the same way you did, and I
yeah,
was like, no, but we're all cheering for you because like you're representing our entire team right now. So yeah, that's super interesting that you brought that up. But I love dodgeball. I haven't played it in forever, but it's just such a kid game, you know.
here's a weird coincidence, and this happens all the time. This is why I'm about to give an example of why I lean into the mysticism stuff too. As scientific as my mind is, and as skeptical as I
Hmm.
am, crazy,
Hmm.
crazy shit happens. So about 2 weeks ago, you're in a dodgeball game in real life. About 2 weeks ago, I'm watching an anime called Hunter x Hunter, and
Oh, I love that one.
one of the challenges they had to overcome was a dodgeball game, and
Oh yeah, I
using their
forgot about that.
supernatural abilities to win
Yeah,
this game physically. I'm like, that
basically cheat.
so there was something happening at that moment prior to you and I ever meeting right now where we were both in the same space of having a dodgeball experience. What the fuck is that? How does that even
Yeah,
happen? And then we meet here, and we very well could have never met, but we did, and share that link. I don't know what it is, but I get that bodily whole body feeling of wow.
actually, as soon as you had me introduce myself, like, and then I saw like something, a couple things click in your head, and like I just got the chills. So I mean, yeah, definitely feeling this our meeting. So I'm really
Very,
happy for it.
very cool. And that trusting those feelings too and leaning into them in terms of what am I trying to say? Not just letting them happen, but feeling their significance, even if you don't understand it. Like just let it be what it is and enjoy it, number one, because some of those chills are like, wow, something just happened there. I love that.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask before I forgot, and I've started taking more notes while I'm talking to people because it's so hard for me to remember stuff.
Yeah.
You described something called Nel. Is that from a specific tradition?
Jhanas are
Jhanas.
it's from like Eastern, like it could be Hinduism, Jainism, Buddhism, they have it too. So they're just yeah, they're just levels. So like I think there's like seven, and it's just like they're different descriptions of what we would just call brainwave states, I guess.
Okay, gotcha. Do they relate to, or are they distinct from the kind of chakra? type of thing, or is that
Mm-mm.
completely different traditions?
They're different. No, I
Okay.
mean they're the same. They're part of the same
Hmm.
tradition, but they're a meditative state. So
Okay.
one is like, let's just say like one feels like just complete bliss, and then one feels like a non-centered bliss, and then like another one feels like a non-dual bliss, and then so like it's just like very minor distinctions, but
Fair
they're
enough.
major because they take maybe more than one lifetime or 20, 30, 40 years to accomplish.
So there might be things that pieces of experience, states of experience that are more or less accomplishable based on practice, focus, effort, and maybe even biologically limited in some ways. If we think of reincarnation as like, well, if you come back as a cockroach, you can't aspire to human understanding.
That's true.
So, and even humans, I think, have different instantiations of their biological. We were talking about this off the air, biological limits. I conceive it as there are two broad camps. Everything is biology. Everything is socially constructed. I think
Mhm.
there. I think it is a necessary yin yang overlap. That it's always nature and nurture. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
how do we know the difference, and what do we do about that? Those are a lot of political and religious, philosophical questions. The way I describe it to try and help people understand that humans are not born tabula rasa, but biology is not destiny. Is that biology draws the boundaries around the possible, and then that's nature, and then nurture determines the expression of what is possible within those boundaries. um, Physical representation would be a person born blind will never see, but then they can live in other ways. The one thing they will never do is just visually perceive the world. Fair enough. Nature draws the boundaries, but then what they can do within that is amazing. I mean, it doesn't need to hold you back from too many things other than, um, playing dodgeball, I guess, literally.
Yeah, definitely playing dodgeball blind could be pretty difficult unless you have like some sonar, like just could
Yeah.
be faster, right? Like we were talking about Hunter x Hunter. I think there's a guy who has sonar power.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, every world record, every Olympian needs to experience flow state in order for them to break those records. And so
Yeah.
like when we're accomplishing superhuman feats like breaking 5-minute mile or whatever, like surfing like 40-foot waves, it's like there's a part of you that has to let go of the sense of self in order for you to fully tap into all the resources that are available to you, because your conscious mind is only like this big. It can like get in like so many
Yeah.
bits of data, but your subconscious mind is just like vast. And so like when you blank that out, the conscious mind, that's when you have access to a lot more resources.
Yeah, definitely. And that's that comports, completely with the Western, say, psychological idea of the subconscious and all the ways we've tried to describe it. Um, I've got a theory of dreams that I'm working on, and it struck me recently after like almost after 2 years of doing this, and now for several months I've been thinking about this idea that seems to me like dreams are the unfiltered thought process that goes on underneath our conscious attention to it and the world, and translating those thoughts into communication. So what you're getting is the conscious attention to the external world, even in some ways to yourself, in terms of directing your thoughts, which we'll leave lucid dreams aside. But it's
Mm.
that state of saying, just being aware. It's almost dreaming is almost exactly like such a deep meditation that you see your thoughts passing as if they were separate from you, like you are
Mhm.
watching your thoughts happen rather than living your thoughts. I don't know if that's something that's occurred to you in terms of like the Eastern conceptions of dreams and meditation, where they overlap. um,
Yeah, there's something called dream yoga, and one of my masters, my teachers in meditation and in Buddhism, talks to us a lot, shares with us about dreams as well. And I've been able to lucid dream since a really young age, probably like
wow.
5 or 6. I really wanted to be like the Green Ranger,
Oh yeah.
Power Rangers, and
Yeah.
so every time I had a dream about Power Rangers, I was like, I want to go back, I want to be the Green Ranger, and so like eventually it happened, and then it consistently happened, and then I started having these experiences of like, we spend so much time in the dream world that like I have all these memories from the dream world, and then I have all these memories from the waking world, and it was just like it's lightweight becoming schizophrenic. I was like, what is like, what's real, what's not real? Like I have a whole life here. Like there's like there because like my dreams are constructed of like similar houses, similar buildings, similar types of people. Like even like I can see people's faces and stuff. People that I never recognize. And sometimes like I might see them in real life. Like I feel like I've seen you before. It's like oh like so it's really strange when growing up that like I have like this repository of all these lucid dreams and then like my waking life and they were completely different and yeah it's I've had dreams where I've died before like
Mm.
was murdered. I was like the Batman. I got murdered and came back as a ghost and yeah all kinds of crazy lucid dreams that were not awesome but also awesome.
Yeah, some of the we watch movies that are adventures and horror films. We like to explore the full range of what's possible, and even sometimes in our subconscious, running thought experiments. What if I was the bad guy? What would happen to me if I did this thing in this circumstance? You know, what do I, sometimes it's even not, could I get away with it because I want to, but what would I think was a reasonable consequence for me if I lived that way, if I did that bad thing? So making yourself the bad guy in a dream is almost never a desire to be the bad guy as much as to understand that perspective, to see it through those eyes, and in some ways, to see how you, as a member of broader humanity, knowing you could go wrong, what would it be like to do so, and whether you could live with that or were comfortable with it, or how do you understand that? Oh, I love those. I love those experiences.
In some sense I think we are the bad guy in somebody's story. I mean we have
You're not
been
the hero in every story. It's true.
yeah, yeah definitely I have we don't have to talk about it, but I've had a pretty crazy past where I
Mm,
used to like sell drugs and guns and all kinds of stuff when I was younger, like 10 years ago or 10 plus years ago. And so I was definitely the bad guy. And I would say some in some parts of my life, maybe I'm still a bad guy, like I'm not always I mean, I try to act with compassion. I try to act with kindness.
mm,
Those are like very high values for me.
yeah.
Harmony is a great value for me, but sometimes I I gotta lay down what I gotta lay down, and so it might make me the bad guy, but I have to be okay with that. So
Yeah. Well, there's also kind of the lovable rascal side of things, or the a lovable asshole in some ways, like a Han Solo type character, where he's done some shady things in his past, but when it came time, he stepped up and did the right thing, and his conscience guided him. He found something to believe in after a while, and decided to commit to that path. That's a great I'm a sucker for the redemption arc. I love that. I want to believe it's possible for everybody, and I want to see even there's some movies that are like that where someone starts out as the bad guy and you see them go through this transformation and they end up the hero that performs a self-sacrifice. And it's like,
I love
I'll
those.
cry. I will. No shame. That's beautiful. Uh, but,
I have trouble
go ahead.
crying, but I do love those. And ever since I was like young, I always wanted to like again back to Power Rangers.
Hmm.
I'm not huge into Power Rangers, but I always wanted the bad guy to win sometimes. Like, why does he always have to lose? Like, it's so like I feel bad for him. Like, God, just like one time, just let him win. Just
Oh
give
yeah.
it to him. Yeah, they just never do. So
That was a story arc in another anime I saw. I can't remember which one, but it was a guy that wanted to, I think it might've been One Punch Man, the second season. They bring in that guy who was a student of the older guy, Gray Fox, Silver Fox, or whatever his name was. And the student went bad because he felt bad for the villain. He's like, I want the villain to win sometime, so I'm going to
oh
become the
yeah,
villain. That's a great,
yeah, yeah,
that's a great idea to explore too.
yeah.
Um,
I like
and, when we were talking about the subconscious and tapping into those powers, I go all over the place. And then I try and come back. I even wrote down some notes on
full
that.
circle.
Yeah, the idea that so the subconscious is okay, separate it from the conscious. It's not just attention, it's that limited attentional bandwidth. In a way, there's only so many things we can consciously process, but everything we ever experience exists in our subconscious. Every taste, touch, and smell, every passing thought, every perceptual
Yes.
distortion, impulse, it's all literally hardwired into our brain by neuronal connections and by the sensitivity of specific pathways. That's why we get into habits, and we get into, and habits are hard to break because those pathways fire so easily. We have to actually build a new pathway that goes a different direction to get off that wrong track, like physically, in real life, and it maps. So what's in your subconscious is vastly more aware of the world. It's like the repository, as you were saying, of everything you've ever experienced physically, mentally, tapping into that, making functional use of it is the trick, because we can only get this. You know, if you have like a giant map and you're zoomed in and you can only see that little bit, but you can move it anywhere. You can move it anywhere, but how do you even know where? You can't tell. Is that a tree? Is that a forest? You can't zoom out. What's connected to here and there? So yeah, tapping into that becomes a difficult part. And then it's these very often the flow states that give us this weirdly zoomed out view of something. We're like, I see everything all of a sudden, and I can do something with it. I don't know if I'm describing that well from your perspective.
That's 100%. And I would also say that in my personal belief is that a lot of things are mapped within our body too. And like, all this, basically the five senses, and then maybe the mind could be a sixth sense, but like it's, it's all within the body. So all the senses map to our brain, right? So, different gustatory, olfactory, everything has a different part to the map of the brain. But also within our body, we have mappings as well. And, so there are some Eastern and also like in massage therapy as well, but like just certain, I guess, bodies of knowledge say that, we store, say, like emotions in our hips or things like that. So, I mean, I think within our body, we have muscle memory and things like that. So when we go into flow states, or when we go into like more, when we lose the perspective of the conscious, it actually allows the body to act more freely in the ways that we're trained to. We don't have to consciously thought about it,
Yeah.
but we just need to like absorb information in our body to do the work.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
it's, like,
There's
the
go ahead.
higher levels of like, if you like in Buddhism, if you go to like the higher levels of, or in any type of meditation school, really, if you go to the higher levels of meditation, and it's all about like, yes, we can get to these peak states where we call it, like I said, like meditative states, but it's really about how do you map that so that your entire conscious living is now like that, not just sometimes when I'm sitting here on this cushion, but like all the time. And so these jhanas actually represent like attainments that you can't come back down from. So once you're there, you know what it's like, and then you map that all backwards, and then your daily living life is like that. And so you get to a certain point where at the highest point is you have no center of conscious. Like you just walk around and everything's happening around you, like kind of like a 360 camera, and like all the senses, everything that you're hearing, you're smelling, it's happening all at once, and you're aware of all that, but it's not like it's going to a central locus. So I think like that's just basically an extension of what you're saying, just like the conscious mind, like the more, I call them open loops, but like the more open loops we have, like we can call them like triggers, or we can call them memories that like kind of make us daydream, or this or that. It's like it takes our processing power, and it goes through this loop. And so like I could be talking about a point, and then I could go tangential, or I can remember something traumatic from when I was a kid or something like that. And the more of these unprocessed things that we have, it takes us away from like our central processing power and our ability to like openly perceive as much as possible. And it just takes a little bit away, takes a little bit away, takes a little bit away, until it's fully resolved. And then when it's fully resolved, we don't have those open loops, and we're a completely grounded system. And yeah, I believe like we're bioenergetic beings, and so we have only so much energy, but the more of it that's grounded, the more of it that's contained, the more effective we are at what we do.
Absolutely, yeah. And so I've been trying to remember all the things I was thinking while you were saying that. It's so hard to listen and think at the same time. Like, oh, that made me think of this. Wait a minute, but I'm still listening. Okay, and that's number two. Shit, and that's why I write it down. I forgot to write it down.
It's an art.
It is. Oh, it's tough, and I can't. I'm so scatterbrained anyway. I was talking to another guy. God, I can't remember his name either. Jay Bouchard, Joel. I was talking to Joel, well, now a few weeks back. By the time anyone watches this, and he was talking about how in his PhD studies, he's a grad student. He's learning things about how, say, the stomach produces more serotonin than the brain. Well, that's a neurotransmitter in the brain that really we've only been able to determine functions in the brain, but we've got the gut sending messages to the brain, which actually it has to because, hey, there's food now, kick up the digestion process and churn more. And there's a mutual communication where the gut's at least telling the brain what it's doing. And then you talked about muscle memory and the idea that movements become automatic. Well, they did some experiments, and I can't remember exactly how they were composed exactly, but the idea of responses to certain stimuli, the response happened in the hand, in the movement of the arm away, say, from a hot thing, like
Hmm.
the before it registered in the brain. So it wasn't, oh, that's hot. Brain says, we know what to do with hot, and it goes back to the hand. It is
Hmm.
that automatic jerk away from a hot stove, say.
Hmm.
That happens in at the site of contact. And then you get into the ideas of muscle memory. So if we conceive the brain, neuronal pathways, certain pathways being stronger or having a lower threshold to trigger. The same thing happens in the body and other points. Points once you've nailed a certain ability to hit a free throw from a three pointer from not a free throw but a 3 pointer from beyond that. You've
Hmm.
your body learns how to do that, and it can do that automatically. It's not even happening in the brain anymore. It is that people think of muscle memory as an analogy, but I think it's kind of literal. It's you don't have brain cells in your muscles, but your muscles, the cells,
I mean,
also
nerve
have a
cells are
memory.
very similar to brain cells, dendrites. Yeah, they're constructed very similarly. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
and they have
we
a
very
communication
similar.
with each other. And if there's a certain, say, a wave pattern that goes through a muscle and into the next muscle, that's what we think of as it's you're positioning your shot here, not as an arc. I mean, there's a specific connection to all these muscles and
Mhm.
that triggers in a specific wave form. Once we've nailed that down, it's so much easier to find it over and
It's
over
a
again.
kinetic chain. So you have, different kinetic chains within your body. There's a few, but basically it's a firing and sequencing. So like,
Yeah,
firing a 3-point shot is different from firing a free throw shot because of the amount of power that's needed to generate. So it's like your body naturally learns how to produce more or less power based on what you want. And in the beginning, you have to think about it, but later on, your body just knows like this is how much force is required. And if you change the weight of the ball, then actually your body has to relearn it. So like
yeah.
back in the day, they were talking about like they used to train quarterbacks in the NFL with like heavier footballs so they could
Oh,
try to
yeah.
throw further, but then actually that messed them up because their body automatically had to learn how to sling a heavier football. But when they, transferred back to a normal size football, normal weight football, it wouldn't go further because their body already compensated for that weight. And
Yeah.
so you can't throw further with the heavier football. You just got to throw further and further with the same. Like you can't like I can't like do more like bench presses to like punch harder. Like I just need to punch more to punch harder. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's some direct correlations between like kinetic chain development and muscle memory, and I definitely think that we I think we're still in the beginning phases of really understanding like I think exercise science or kinesiology.
Hmm.
But one of the things I think about, and this is probably not true, but it is, I don't know, like if you look like the evolutionary chain biologically, one of the earlier animals is like a worm, for instance, but a worm doesn't really have a brain. It just
Hmm.
has like a stomach and then has a nervous system. And so like if you like poke a worm, like it kind of just does this thing, right? But it doesn't actually have a brain. So like its nervous system functions to feed the stomach. So it's like when the stomach is hungry, it's like, okay, let's get some food or whatever, right? And so like it's driven to find food through basically this nervous system. And so, I think about us and the way that we develop. It's like we have a stomach, or we call it like the second brain or the gut, but there's like so many nerve cells. Like I don't know if you've ever eaten intestines, but it's like mostly fat. Why? Because like, well, fat is fat carries electricity, and so if we're having like nerve tissue, like that's pretty much what the gut is. It's like tons of nerve tissue. It's like again the second brain. So how I think of it is like possibly, origins of evolution is we develop with a brain. I mean, a brain here so that we can feed everything, the whole entire system and all the organs, and then we developed a higher conscious brain. But then if we, I think, more fully associate with like the higher conscious brain, then we lose connection to our body. And so,
Yeah.
like when we can balance both of them, is basically when we can become our full function of like how we were evolved to become. But I think because we live in this society and there's so much data, there's so much knowledge, there's so much information that
Yeah.
we get overly emphasized on the brain, the head part, and we lose connection to the body part. It's like the body is like the instinctual, like, well, what I want to eat, or like what's good for me to eat, like what do I. So it's like, but we get hijacked by like so much like dopamine and so much like
Oh, yeah.
knowledge, so much information, so much trash. That sounds good, that feels good, but isn't good, and so it's hard to
Yeah.
disconnect, reconnect. But I think it's very important.
We did. That brings up so many. I mean, just the concept of human nature, say, and the results of advancement change over time. It's hard to say it's progress or advancement, but
Mm.
there's a certain amount of advancement or progress or change over time that accelerated because we started living in cities with agriculture. And
Oh yeah.
it's hard to say return to monkey. Some people do, go back to hunter gatherer because that's the ideal state of mankind. Well, that doesn't really let us produce, heart surgery and antibiotics and different things that maybe
It's
we want.
impossible to go back. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
never
yeah.
go back.
You can't
I got this
really go
book right
back.
here. It's a great book. It's called The Hunter and Gatherer's Guide to the 21st Century. Have you heard of it?
Nice. That does sound familiar. Who's the author?
Brett Weinstein.
Oh, yes, that's why I'm familiar with it. Very nice, very nice.
Yeah,
I should read that. I got so many books on my list, and as soon
everything about this. Yeah, it's great.
well, that's what I'm looking at with the whole city and technology thing. Is that I've been having arguments lately. I argue with people online. This format, my show, is collaborative, and we just discuss, and it's not debates, and there's no confrontation. But I need to explore ideas in other contexts, so I do that at Discord servers and Twitter and whatnot. I speak my mind and challenge opinions and try and learn. So there's been an ongoing debate about the idea that we've produced more technology than we are capable of adapting to. Like there's
Yep.
been too much of the pace of change, not change itself. It's in this case, it's just the pace of change, especially
Hmm.
with social media. You were talking about dopamine hits and whatnot, and
Hmm.
possibly ever since the radio, specifically the television, we've been able to see a representation of the Joneses that in our mind we're trying to keep up with. It used to be you live in a
Hmm.
village, you're not competing socially or trying to keep up with anyone more than just the people around you, and you're all pretty similar. Maybe a guy has a great idea and he's like, you can do this too, and then you learn from him. Now everybody's got it. But the pace of change and the rapidity of ideas and it's social media, so it's hard to say this isn't a good thing. The same thing that makes social media possible allows me to talk to you right now and produce my own social media or content in a way.
Hmm.
But it's I don't know. It's a huge problem that
That's
I don't
one of
think
the
we've
main
solved.
discussions in the book was where they talk about the rate of which adaptation happens, or like the context which you grew up in is completely different from the context of your adult life, and that's never been the case before. So
Yeah,
like 100 years ago, like if you grew up, I don't know, say like 100 years ago, the technology would not change so dramatically that when you're an adult, like that it would just be completely different. Like when I grew up, we didn't have social media, and when you grew up, we didn't have social media, but now we have social media. So like our learning like phase did not prepare us for what's happening right now in our lives, and so like we're inadequately prepared for what's happening. And there's
oh yeah,
also this argument about like we inherit, this is one of my arguments really. It's just like we inherit like all this technology, like how to drive like just being able to drive a car, like nuclear power, whatever, but we didn't really earn any of it. And so we
yeah,
don't really have the morality that comes with that, the morality that binds like a lot of power. This is like the Spider-Man line, right? Like with great power comes great responsibility. And like we have so much great power, but we have zero responsibility. We have zero accountability to it because
yeah,
we just don't, like I just need to have money and then I could buy a car. I just need to be 16 and I could drive it. So I don't need to have any sense of responsibility, really. And so I think a lot of times I think there's this spectrum between like entitlement and um and having earned something. And I think like by earning something, it takes us away from it, the entitlement. And I think like we live in a society without rites of passages, really, and so
yeah,
we're not really forced to earn our way through different technological achievement or power. Like in a video game, for instance, like you got to
yeah.
earn every step of the way. That's what makes it enjoyable. That's how we're wired. But and the way that things are right now, it's not set up like that.
Well, and then there's pluses and minuses too with that. So in the past, before video games, we had no choice but to physically excel and I don't mean sports wise, like physical accomplishments, but physically in the world, excel at whatever we choose to do and to get our dopamine hits that way from literal physical accomplishment, doing something. Now, since we seem to have lost a lot of that, Have we? That's maybe I'm begging the question. Now, a lot of people are seeking that through, say, video games or other means, likes on social media. It, and I don't know, and maybe it's hard to say because it's available and easier. Maybe we choose that over the more difficult, maybe more rewarding way. Or there was a second point I was going to make with that. I don't know if you see that differently, or you can expand on my. If you see where I was going.
Maybe like I just don't feel like discernment is rewarded, and I think discernment is a very important attribute of of being a human being. But I think in this modern time, when we're just inundated by options, we're inundated with information, we have
Yeah.
to be able to discern like what it is that we're here to do. Because, and that's a big part of my work is like I think that we're all here to do something. I think we're all here to do great and amazing things. And I think the way that society is constructed right now isn't necessarily conducive for that, but that's
Mm,
okay. We just need to know what it is we want to do so we can get there. And so like if you jump in your car and you don't know where you're going, then it's gonna be hard to like basically leave the driveway. And so like when we have like a top down level of discernment, then we can rank order like what it is that we need to do, what is important for us. And I think a lot of times for people it's just work, or it's the kind of these things that are like downloaded or passed down through us. And they're just cultural ideas that we don't really own. And so like a lot of these arguments that people are having, whether that's hot button topics like transgender or whatever, it's like these
yeah.
are just ideas that have been passed down and not really wholly examined. Or there's a lot of ideas, I guess, that people are debating about, nuclear power or this or that, but it's like they haven't been wholly examined for their merits. And so, like maybe nuclear power isn't that bad. Like maybe there's a safe way to do it. There's just all of these types of arguments, but you have to have a level of discernment. So like we pass these ideas to Congress, but like these people they're not trained in these matters, and like they don't spend their time like really like they might not even be qualified to really understand these ideas. And so
Yeah.
it's really hard.
Their
When it
specialty
comes
seems to be how to get votes. Well, they do that very
yeah,
well. They got elected.
yeah,
Now what? Now they have to actually govern. What you were saying there brought me back to what the point I was aiming towards,
nice.
which I'm trying to formulate. Right? Thank you for that. I'm trying to formulate an idea, and it had to do with narrative. It's like
Okay.
when things don't change quickly, we have
Hmm.
an older narrative, an understanding that can be communicated to the next generation, and it's going to function because the circumstances are similar. If something changes, it takes a little bit of time to negotiate a new narrative. What is the tradition we pass down to the next generation? If
Mm,
you have, like in my case, so you a few years older than you, I was born and lived a good, into my teens before the internet ever existed, before cell
mm,
phones. Really I've experienced in my lifetime a tremendous amount of rapid change. You used to have to find a payphone, couldn't just call someone.
mhm,
There was no
mhm,
online communities. Like way back when, I think I was 11, 12 years old when a friend of mine had a modem, a cradle modem. You have to take your phone out of the kitchen, put it down on a physical cradle that would then talk and listen through the computer to this was the very first instantiation of the internet, a la DARPA, created by the
mm,
government type of thing. And it was just um, government agencies that were working on it in the tech sector, and it was connected to schools, and that was where the first multi-user dungeons and online bulletin board system BBSs started.
mm,
You used to be able to download or at least access ASCII images that were not naughty for for a 12-year-old to be looking at. Like, but it was
mhm.
just a pictorial representation of something that it wasn't like a full color magazine spread, that kind of thing. So that's what are you gonna do when you're a kid? Like, look at this place I found. It's got a drawing. It's got a naughty pictures.
Yeah, but
It's
it's
interesting.
just it's still representation, and
True.
the emotions are still triggered. The stimulus is still there, so it works.
It does. It does. Well, that was all nested in the same stories going off on it. I just hit my memories there. Uh, so let's say someone was like me and you're born before all these things exist. And now I am of the age that I could have a child with a child of their own. I don't have any kids, but if I'd had a kid, they could be 20, 25 years old by now and I could be a grandfather. Physically, it's possible. What do I tell that kid who's going to now grow up for the next 20 years about the world I came from and how to understand the world we're in right now? I don't have, and I think that's where we're in this culture war. It's almost necessary. It's almost unavoidable consequence of the rapidity of change, because we haven't settled on a broadly accepted cultural narrative that lets us put things in a framework that we can understand and function within. It's as clear as I can make it.
Yeah,
Those
no,
were my
I think
thoughts.
that points to, for me, the importance of first principle thinking.
Mm,
And through first principle thinking is what breaks what takes us to the elements, right? So
yeah,
the elements is something in which, I mean, definitionally can no longer be broken down. This is the most base, and that is essentially what a
yeah,
first principle idea is also. So when you can basically, like, I can, like, with the elements, or like I have, say, like I have this, like I have a weapon here, right? So say this is a knife. I'm not gonna unsheath it, but so we have like this in this weapon, we have, like, first principally, we have like a tip, we have the blade edge, we have the backside, we have the side, and then we have the back of it, right?
yeah.
So like every weapon, like first principle is like this actually. Like a gun is like this as well. A staff is like this as well. So, like, once I boil the first principle of that down, anything that I touch is actually can become a weapon because of the first principle of thinking. All I need to know is the balance point. That's all I need to know. From
Mm,
that balance point, then I can understand how to use that weapon, how to, like, whip it, or, use it. And so, like, I don't need to understand, like, okay, like in 50 years there's gonna be this crazy weapon. Like, it all has to boil down into just first principles. And then, so, like, I have the driver's manual for every weapon in first principle, but I can apply that to snowboarding as well. I can apply that to, like, tennis as well. So I think what what we really need is like a clean operating system that's robust enough to handle whatever comes its way. And it
yeah.
doesn't need to be complex. It actually needs to be really simple. And so I think we take that example from first principles, and then we just apply it to nature. And I think that's what the elements, elemental system is. Um, so I think it's been really helpful for me and the people that I've worked with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the benefits of tradition is not reductionist, reducing in a way, because down to first principles, the idea of here's a re- recurring pattern that you will experience, and here's a variety of ways to interact with that pattern. And I think that's kind of getting to the core of what the utility of first principles. So I go down to say philosophical first principles of what was the guy who said that? I think it was Immanuel Kant, or I always get him confused with some of the arguments with John Locke. So those Enlightenment era philosophers, that
Hmm.
humans are ends in and of themselves and are never to be used as means to your end or to anyone else's end. So I get down to that's a very like what is it? Guide stone is what I'm trying. It's like a moral compass for me.
Hmm.
Is
Hmm.
this respecting a person for their individuality and treating them as an end in and of themselves, or am I trying to use a person as an instrumental tool? People cannot be tools. People are not tools. People, you can interact with them for reasons, but you can't. They can't be used as tools. It's a fundamental moral wrong at a level of reducing a person to an object. And that's so when you talk about first principles, that resonates with me so strongly. Then you get into psychology and broader areas of like that. And the purpose, as I've said in an episode recently, the purpose of, say, therapy, a therapeutic interaction with a person, is not to have them leave that interaction behaving as you prefer them to. Even if I think something is good for them, even if I think they're making a mistake, I will tell them that. But I cannot use them as a tool to accomplish my end. They are not just a means to an end of here's another person in the world the way I want them to be. Even if
Hmm.
that is what I want, and even if they're going to get to where they want through other means, yes, I want someone happy, healthy, functional, and not hurting anyone. Let's see if we can get there in a way that doesn't use you, treat you like an object to be manipulated towards that end. I probably just said the same thing three different ways. Go ahead.
That's good. I think that helps drive home the point. I think the base for me personally of all healthy, successful interhuman, interpersonal interaction is what you just shared. It's just, we don't, like, we come with the best interests, and we can give only what can be received,
Mm,
and we're not attached to how it's received, you know. So like, you
Yeah.
know, I always have like money in my cash in my wallet for just whenever I meet a homeless person, which there is another topic, but it seems to be so much more now of homeless
There's a
people.
few.
But
That's another recent change that seems to be getting worse.
and that points to the mental health issues that we have, I think.
Yeah.
But the you know, I give it to people, right? And people always ask me like, oh, you know, like they're just gonna spend on drugs. Like, well, I mean, what does it matter what they spend on? Like, I'm just, you know, I just if I
Yeah.
feel like helping them, I want to help them. It's like it's not because I want them to like have a burger or like try to get a job with this money. It's like it's just, you know, I think we should be unattached, ideally, but it's hard because we have this very rigid center of perspective, you know,
Mm.
that like I am me and you are you. And I think with social media, it actually makes it a little bit worse. I think there's a correlation between narcissism and social media,
Oh yeah.
unfortunately. And so like the more we tend to use social media, the tendency on the narcissistic index, it tends higher, from what I've seen at least. And so it doesn't make it difficult to live in the way that you're saying, you know, with respecting people as individual human beings and not as a means to our ends.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think that's something we have to grapple with as society and as social media, you know, gets bigger. Hopefully, they don't ban TikTok, but if they do, that that could change things quite a bit too.
That's its own interesting conundrum. It's like I'm let's, for the sake of argument, say it is a net negative. Still, should it be banned? Does that violate some first principles that maybe we shouldn't cross, some lines we shouldn't cross? And then there is the basic question of, is it really bad necessarily? I don't know. I look at it like there is no tool of mankind that is inherently good or bad. It's all about how you use it.
100%.
Then again, you know, there's people who talk about the addiction model, and there's controversy in psychology with this too. Is like, should we allow someone to go ahead and be an addict because it's their right to do so, even if we think the drug itself is influencing the decision making process that would allow them to stop if they wanted to? What do they really want, and how much free will do they have? So we get these things like social media on the same side. It's not a chemical in your body, it's inducing natural chemicals. Is someone, say, so addicted that they are hurting themselves by excessive obsession or usage of this medium, such that they're no longer fully in control of themselves and it's harming them? And how do we respond to that? Hell if I know. That's way above my pay grade. I'm trying to figure it out, but yeah. So I can't say that I would endorse. I can say that I do not endorse banning TikTok for other reasons way outside of exactly how it functions and its effects. I think first principle side, I would say maybe we shouldn't do that. Um,
Yeah, I think it's a difficult issue. I think, you know, a lot of it points to the trade war issues we're having
mm,
economically, and
mm-hmm.
also China rising as a superpower. There, you know, obviously there are more people or countries, I should say, entering BRIC, which is you know, Saudi Arabia is I think they're, I don't know. I don't want to talk about too much like current affairs, but yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, we could, but it's like it seems like they're entering as well as some other key countries are entering. So if they do, then you know, that could potentially threaten our hegemony. And
it's
if that
true.
does, then you know, going deeper into this trade war with China, you know, this chip war that we have, and then now like technology war that we have with them, and would probably make it harder for us to come back if we did lose number one, or if we lose, you know, dollar as being the global currency.
Yeah,
It could make things, we could be very find, you know, find ourselves very alone on the global stage. So I think
it's true.
probably it's not diplomatically the best decision, but
Yeah.
I'm not there, so.
I just a thought just occurred to me, and that whole thing is like, if I mean the accusations being leveled, and maybe it's true. Hell if I know that the TikTok software itself is spyware of a kind. So I think a lot of, at least whether that's true or not, that is a reason being asserted for the necessity of a ban. And I wonder if there's just other ways to account for that. Of like we say, well, of course it is. Why wouldn't it be? And here's what we can do about it. Let's write a code that acts as an antivirus specifically for TikTok. So it functions, but it can't access your data in other ways. Now, if that isn't the case, which again, hell if I know, I'm not deep enough into this stuff to figure it. I'm just kind of hearing it like you are. If it's not actually spyware and they're just talking about, well, they're collecting your data, your patterns of behavior, that's a different story. That's, I mean, Facebook does that. Twitter does that. Is it for the good or bad? What algorithms are they using? I have heard the argument that TikTok in China has a very different algorithm built into it than for America, which is not necessarily nefarious, but the difference seems to be TikTok is programmed to show people more pro-social things in China, educational and whatnot, and in America it's more um, excitement, drama oriented, which may just be a difference in our cultures. Maybe that's what people click on in America. We like our little illicit thrill, and they like their science and education. Maybe so, or there's something more nefarious going on there with like it's being programmed to culture jam America on purpose.
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know either. But that is an ongoing debate currently. I don't know how to resolve it.
Yeah, it's a difficult. I don't think there's enough people that are well versed on that to make the right decision, probably,
That's a
that
big
are,
problem.
because there's a financial interest in
Yeah,
all of
that
this,
too.
right?
Yeah.
And going to the whole issue with the algorithm, it's, we have a huge difference in our culture, and it's also
Mm-hmm.
like, where is the data stored? And supposedly the data stored here, and it doesn't go to China. And then they found out, oh, it does go to China. And so it's like, well, then, like, what are they doing with all the data? And like, well,
Yeah.
all of our Zoom calls are going through China too. So what's happening there? And so it's like,
Yeah.
there's all these things to consider that no one person is really uh, knowledgeable or wise enough to make the decision on.
Yeah.
When you include more people, then you include more separate motivations. You include more, separate incentives to
Yeah.
make certain types of
Motivated
decisions.
reasoning. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's difficult. That's a difficult issue.
It is for sure. Well, this is far afield from the body mechanics and translatable. What'd you call it? Transferable mastery. I wondered, since we touched
Is
lightly,
it really?
and I think philosophically on the nature of some current event stuff, setting aside everything recent that may have happened with this particular person, but Scott Adams was always big on and wrote a book about it. The idea of a talent stack. He says the more things you can get mastered, the more things that then become transferable to other areas and other masteries. So I think he was expressing a very similar concept. And it's great that it's what am I say? It's great and it's not great that we get into these cycles of rediscovery. Like there was a huge trend in Eastern mysticism in the late 1800s, and then we fell out of that, and we've gone into the very highly rigorously scientific, and we're above all that superstition. And now it's kind of coming back. We're like, wait a minute, they had a point. And people have been deeply thinking about these things for 2, 3, 5, 10,000 years. Who knows? And I was just saying this in another episode recently that we want to be very careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater in terms of traditions. Maybe something needs to change a little bit here, a little bit there, but it survived this long because it worked. It did. It just doesn't mean it can't be better, but it means we don't want to scrap it all and start over. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. And a lot of people do. Like we forget these tremendously important and I think very true philosophical concepts, and then they get rediscovered later as if no one had ever thought of that before. And that's, I think, to our detriment. But then again, how do we educate every single human being in the full breadth of thought that millions of people have ever thought throughout the entirety of human history? That seems impossible as well. We're almost doomed to this forgetting and rediscovering cycle. I don't know if you have a thought on that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I had this idea that, the standard of life has changed, socioeconomically, but
Yeah.
like the amount of luxury that we have,
Hmm.
maybe it's not that crazy different, like, from in terms of just the wealthiest. Like maybe we have AC. We
Yeah.
do have AC, but I have this idea that, the lifestyle that we have, we cherish so much, is not really that different. So like, what really
Yeah.
has changed? I'm not really sure. Like, I mean, I study a lot of history and technology, and so we can say, specific innovations in medicine and things like that have changed. Um,
But the purpose seems to be
There's
the same. You know, it's we want people to be
yeah,
happy and healthy, good relationships. You know, a community that you can function in and stay alive and accomplish your personal goals. No, a lot of these things don't change. Like what it means to live a good life. We've been arguing that for a long
yes,
time. It is material things. It's kind of
yes,
what those material things afford you in terms of
yes.
experience. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it goes back to also this topic that we were talking about with like, like all this kind of out there political things. It's like, um, I think at the end of the day, these types of decisions are made politically,
mm,
so like geopolitically
yeah,
speaking. So I mean that's probably like outside of the algorithm, outside of like whether what's being saved or served to us. It's really just about like power positioning, and I mean everything
yeah,
is for like the time that we live in. It's about that. So it's like I guess it's just like at what level do we need to make the decisions at,
yeah.
and that is like relevant to our lives, right? So it's like for me personally, like I can't make any decision really. Like for me personally, I can't make any decision about the global stage. So
Oh yeah,
I generally don't concern myself with things that are outside of my locus of power, but my locus of power is continually increasing as I develop more influence, as my community gets stronger, or I'm tapping into more communities. As so, like that is kind of like in a way like my video game life of like earning more influence and
yeah.
change in my own way, and that's the proof of the pudding. It's like the better you are at what you do, like life will reflect that in so many ways, and so like. That's just one of my things. Is like whatever your experience of life is, like that's exactly what you wanted, and there's a time delay between like when you decide that you want something and when you actually get it, and but the results are always there, the result of your life, like how you live and what you eat, or like what your relationships are like, is that is the resultant factor of your decisions.
Oh
So
yeah. Well, this that inspired me of some other recent conversations I've been hearing. The idea of simulation theory and the broad concept that we are. I think that maps onto the idea that we are luminous beings, as Yoda would say. We are not this crude flesh. And what that really means is that, and there's a perfect analogy. We're in a game, we're in a simulation, but it is reality. So we're not a brain in a vat being tricked to think we're in a physical world. The physical world is the simulation, but it is a subcategory of the larger reality in a sense. And the analogy is to massive, life in my estimation is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. We are all here in this same thing. We are embodied in these physical forms, but we are at the same time something else that is operating
totally
this
agree.
avatar. Yeah, this avatar in the world.
Yep.
And we need to partner with teammates to go on quests. We need to level up our experience and expand our skill trees to
Hmm.
gain new special. That's such a brilliant analogy. If someone hadn't already written the book, Everything I Needed to Know in Life I Learned from D&D, I would say I would the same book about online role playing games. I think it's
You could do the
fantastic,
same book just in a different niche.
right?
You could do it in business. You could do it in, I
That's
mean, there's
true.
so many, I mean, yeah, it's multi-segmental marketing really. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. Actually, what's funny is one of the products that we developed is basically we call it the hyperbolic time chamber,
Mm,
and it's just like a group of friends, and we have this like Excel sheet, and it has like all the skills and this the experience points that are associated with each like habit that we have. So and like if you stack habits, they call like on Twitter they call them twofers, but like like I can like five stack of habits. I'll give you an example. When I wake up, one of the first things I do is I spend some time outside looking at the sun. That's good for my hormones. It's good for my circadian rhythm, and so that's one thing. But at the same time, I'm also doing it's called a coconut pull. So I'm like swishing coconut oil in my mouth for
mm,
30 minutes, and at the same time I'm reading for 30 minutes. At the same time, I'm topless and wearing boxers, getting vitamin D. So that's four things in a row. And then I could be doing,
yeah.
so like I could be on the treadmill as well and getting some exercise in while I'm doing the reading. So like I'm getting five things in at once. But I only developed this through the hyperbolic time chamber because I'm trying to rack up these points, because everybody's trying to rack up these points. And so we're all in a game, like, but we kind of like predetermine like what does our ideal day look like? Like what are the things that we need to do? Like where that, like, what is the level of intentionality and the level of like intention that we put into the things that we do. And so we're all, there's like five of us, and then we have like this VA who's like tallying all the points on the, referencing them to the Excel sheet. And so it's a pretty fun game, but we're literally playing a video game collaboratively with each other in the same way that you're
Yeah,
talking about.
for sure. Well, that just sparked something with me too. And so, a video game analogy, we have the idea of min-maxing, minimum, maximum. So how do you get the, say, maximum result from minimum effort, or what is the um, and it's all about refining efficiencies in different ways. I try to do that myself. And, there's some things, once upon a time we might have called it multitasking, but it isn't really that way because we actually can't do two, say, mental tasks at the same time. I don't believe anyone, and maybe I'm wrong, but I certainly can't
I think
read.
if you don't have your corpus callosum, you can.
Oh, well, maybe so. No, fair enough. Yeah. And maybe that's an advantage. Maybe we should all have them cut. And with all that, this is not medical advice. Please consult your doctor. It's, for me, impossible to read and truly comprehend a paragraph and listen to a conversation at the same time and understand them both. My attention is very narrow on that, but you can do things from different categories at the same time. And as you were saying, and that's the idea of this maximum efficiency. I used to try to do, well, I'm still experimenting with that in a lot of different ways, but I will do things like, what's a good example? It's, we go way back in the day in the 1800s. They had a grand tradition of the morning constitutional. They would get up and take a walk, and they were getting sunshine and exercise and looking at nature around them to learn things from the visual display. And at the same time, thinking about, these philosophical things. They'd come back from their walk and they'd write part of an essay of their book. And that's how you get, Immanuel Kant and John Locke. And it was a big deal. And they were multitasking in a way, these things from different categories of tasks that you can get done all at the same time. And if you're doing that, kind of maximum efficiency is better than doing each one separately, consecutively. You want to do them concurrently, if possible, in a way that doesn't conflict, where none of the things impairs the other because they are on different levels. That's my rant on that idea. I think that's genius.
You can totally train your brain to do that. I mean, because I had ADHD, there was a way that I had to learn how to focus, and but it's transferable actually. But it's basically a rank ordered priority stack switching. So if I needed to, say, like read and listen at the same time, I would listen. It's kind of like speed reading as well, but like speed reading is like you're basically like looking at structure, and then like based on the structure, you're looking for like the meat of things, right? And so like language has a structure, and so when I'm listening and I'm reading at the same time, I can shut off I can just listen for the structure, but while still reading, and then absorb using the structure of the writing, like absorb those parts, and then while I'm still waiting for the juice of what I'm listening to,
Yeah.
and I can switch over. And then so like I can't do both at once, but I kind of like leave a monitor on each one, so I know when to switch over. So that you can actually apply that to a lot of things. You can apply that to martial arts. It's like the reason I love martial arts and the reason why I love business is because it's really like the pragmatic, most practical sense of application of anything that's theoretical, anything that's mental. If you can't do that, like a philosophical idea, if you can't do that, like with your body, if you can't apply that to the world through business, then like, why does it exist, right? It's just so abstract. That's like, what's the point? And so like, that's why I'm so huge in on business. Like I've built many businesses, sold them, and spent 25 years plus just doing martial arts, because like I want to find like the core essence of embodiment, of philosophy, of thought, of theory, and be able to express that in physical form. Yeah, I've been obsessed with that.
That's very cool. Yeah, I think there should be. I was having this discussion the other day too. Okay, number one, before I forget it, as you were describing that, I'm like, what I actually do is I listen and think my own thoughts at the same time. So there is something that going on, and I'm trying not to let my own thoughts take me away from listening, but I also want to have something to respond. I want to understand what you're saying and carry on the conversation. So I have to plan ahead, strategize in a way that is natural. It's like it has to be relevant. So I do that. It's very difficult for me. I'm not, that's not natural. So there's once again, the biological boundaries and the nurturing expression of them. I do the best I can. We all do. So, oh, don't forget that thought. Where was I going with that? Oh, the physical instantiation. I've recently had a concept that like the most real things are where the abstract and the concrete intersect. I don't know how to explain that much better, but like I think abstract things are as real as physical things, but not in the same way. I mean, when you say real, people think physically tangible. I can touch it. It's a desk. But what we have here is the instantiation, and that's why I use that word, like the physical manifestation of the idea desk. What is it? It's a platform upon which one may do a particular kind of work. It's a surface for work, basically. And then there's the concrete example. This is a particular kind of desk. This is one form of desk. There are many. So that's what I consider that intersection of the abstract and the concrete, and that neither one is less real than the other. One is just less physical than the other. And I get into arguments with people who are like, well, how do you prove the abstract is real and you're not just fooling yourself, or it's not just an idea that has no substance? I'm like, well, if you can physicalize it, if you can make a desk, the concept of a desk is real because it is what it does. And that goes back to, I think it's Plato. I can never remember. I think it's Plato's Forms, the world of forms. This is what he was trying to get across with that idea that anything physically possible already exists as an idea that may or may not be currently thought by a person, but it does not disappear when we stop thinking it. The nature of what is a desk or a chair specifically. I love that idea is, a chair is what a chair does. It's a place for sitting, and it has a particular shape. It will not stand up without at least 3 legs. Maybe it has a back on it, and that makes it a chair and not a stool. And anything that does not perform the function of a chair is not a chair. It does if it does, and it doesn't if it doesn't. Then you get into the other philosophical ideas of, well, what if it, how many grains of sand do you have to remove until it is no longer a heap? How many parts of the ship of Theseus do you have to swap out until it's not the same ship anymore? I don't know that I have answers to those either, but that's kind of where I go with some of those ideas. But this was all built on your triggered all these thoughts on your idea of trying to instantiate these ideas physically in the world. And I think you're exactly right. That's how you know you're onto something. If you can put it to some practical use and it works, that's the true essence of genius, or Archimedes type eureka moment.
And I think it goes back to just like our life being a reflection of the results of our decisions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like whatever philosophy you have, whether how abstract it is, it doesn't really matter. But what matters is the life that you're living. Are you happy?
Yeah.
Because you could be successful, but if you're not happy, then I don't know how you're defining success. That might suck, to be successful and not happy.
Yeah.
Or fulfilled. So like, how do you define that? And like whether how pie in the sky that theory is for fulfillment, or the philosophical idea behind it, if you're not living. Because I felt, when I was studying philosophy, that many philosophers, they had these like really high aspirations, but their life seemed to like really suck,
Yeah.
So I was like, well, why did you spend all this time like thinking about all this stuff, and like you just like maybe just live a little bit better, so I think there has to be that connection between like, what kind of life do you live, and like how fulfilling is that, and what are your relationships like? Because if you don't have like, even like a relationship with your cat, like if your cat doesn't like you, but you like, it's just like this one-sided relationship, that it's like, it sucks, right? And
Yeah.
like, if you have guiding beliefs that lead you to behave that way, then that's kind of like just shooting yourself in the foot. And I think a lot of the value in life is just getting what you want, so that you can be happy and fulfilled and share that with other people.
For sure. Yeah. I think a lot of the practice, say, of psychology is asking people, how's that working out for you? I mean, just ask them. And it isn't even like, I'm not condemning you. Maybe you are ecstatic, but I look at that and I see the potential for problems. So are there any? How is that working out for you? You know, and not in a gotcha kind of way, and not in a persuasive kind of way, but just honestly tell me, is this working? Is this the way you want to live? And I don't know how many people do or do not actively engage in that kind of thing. I'm like, how is this working for me? Is this doing what I wanted to accomplish? The flip side of that, in some ways, is there is the tortured artist phenomenon where someone is just driven by who knows what to produce something that other people go, whoa, that's really cool. The mad scientist, in a way, sometimes too. There's two sides of that. The nutty professor, he's not, then there's the evil genius, mad scientist style. Both driven in different ways towards different ends. But yeah, there's balancing that. I want to live a good life. I would like to be happy. I also want to live a meaningful life that might involve a little bit of suffering. How do I know this is too much suffering, or I'm suffering for no purpose that is not actually getting me closer to my goal? Big questions. I wish I had answers.
I think
We'll solve it on the next episode.
No, I think that's a beautiful question because we suffering is a given. It's like you just breathe, you're gonna suffer.
Yeah, being alive.
There's a moment that you can't breathe. So that's the first, I think, fundamental first principle problem that we have. And so it's like, well, if that's a given, then how do I make that worth it? And then it's like, okay, well, what do you want? Is that worth it? And then that's pretty much the juxtaposition, the dance that you go and you scale all the way up to what it is that you want, and is it worth the trouble, the suffering that it's going to come with. And then there's like the strategies that you use to get there, and some strategies that we have are better. Strategies are just ways of getting what we want, right? And so some strategies we'll find out that are not that great, and some strategies are great. So is having, say, like 50 cats better than 5? Is there a diminishing return, right?
Right.
So what's the strategy for that happiness, right? And so you just it's just, I think, for me, with the suffering problem and the suffering question, is just like, well, like what's worth it to you?
Yeah.
And
what are you really trying to accomplish out of this? And is it working? Yeah. You picked that, like you were saying, you're sitting in the driveway and you don't have a destination. What are you doing? You literally could drive in circles until you figure it out, or you could think about it first. Get a map, do some research, and pick a destination before you even get in the car. There's a lot of best practice type of things that's what I lean towards. Like the sphere of what I consider moral absolutes is very small, very specific, and it's usually interpersonal. Asking people for consent before I record. Never releasing video that I've not had permission to release. This is, to me, moral absolutes. Like, I just don't get to choose why. Fuck, I'm not doing that today. No, which to me, that's just wrong. And then a lot of everything else is just aesthetics. It's like, well, what do you like? I was complimenting your room there, and you're like, it's got white walls and a wave. I think that's the very famous Japanese painting of the wave, but put in a triptych. Maybe you don't like ocean. Maybe you don't like Japanese art. Maybe whatever. And put a different painting on the wall. That's not a moral question. There's a lot of things in life that are like that. It's like, if it's working for you, so be it. That's what you want. Like people that are in relationships where they like their significant other to be just a little mean or bordering on abusive to them. They enjoy that. Not for me, but I'm not here to tell them they're doing something wrong, unless they wake up one morning and they're like, I don't like this. How did this happen? I want to change it. I'm like, now we got something to talk about. Now you got a goal. And it's like, you can't, usually people go to, I'm going to quit rambling here in a minute, but people go to a psychologist like, doc, something ain't right. I don't feel good. Something's wrong. This isn't working for me. Now, and that's the whole purpose. Like, a psychologist has no goal in therapy other than find out what your negative experience is and try to alleviate it if possible. That goes back, it's ancient tradition, but certainly at least to Freud's instantiation. I'm going to stop using that word. His invention of the practice of talk therapy, in that sense of like popularizing it. People were doing that before, and you might say priests have been doing that for 2,000 years. But the idea that you can go to a doctor and just talk it out, and by talking it out, you're going to hopefully discover something that is not working the way you wish it would. And then you can figure out what to do about it. So I think a lot of what you're doing with the life mastery thing is that let's be proactive in teaching some frameworks of how to look at best accomplishing goals. You still got to have goals, but there's going to be best practice methods that are going to get you lay a foundation in some ways to raise you up towards those goals faster, more effectively, more efficiently. Definitely stack it as like yours. I love that example. Do it. If you can do 5 things at once and you do them all completely without infringing on each other, do it. That's brilliant. So
Those are the wins. And I
yeah,
think a
that's my
lot of times
commentary.
when we're talking about goals, the difficulty is there are like hidden measures of sabotage that are embedded within goals sometimes. So if we
Yeah,
have emotional baggage around a goal, or if the goal is not really a goal that we really wanted, say
yeah,
for my parents, they wanted me to become a lawyer. And so a lot of my life, I was like, well, I'm going to be a lawyer. I'm just going to be good at, going to debates and learning philosophy and all this. And that was my goal for a long time, but I was hitting my head against the wall because honestly, like in my heart, like I didn't really care to be a lawyer. Like, what is
yeah,
that going to do? And so there's all this emotional baggage. Like, well, if I let that go, my parents aren't gonna love me, and like they're not gonna respect me,
yeah.
and all this stuff. So I think like one of the first things I do when I work with somebody is like we're just figuring out like where the emotional baggage is, and I use like neuro-linguistic techniques to, or like hypnosis, or just various techniques and tools to do like timeline therapy or something to like release limiting beliefs or emotional baggage, negative
Nice.
emotions that are associated with the worldview that could become problems later on. Because like from the very outset of the journey, if you can have like if, I don't know if you got backpacking, but like you don't want to carry like 200 pounds of stuff with you like your whole life. You're gonna
Especially
like
things you
family
don't need.
photos.
Yeah. It's something
So
that's
in the
not going
beginning
to
of the trip,
facilitate your journey. Yeah.
we're just eliminating all the clutter, emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever, just to make sure that you have what you need to be successful on this trip so that you can see success, so you can taste success. And then once you have a habit of tasting success, we're gonna just keep doing that, and we're gonna build that across like multiple quests, and everything just becomes a side quest, and
Oh
your
yeah.
life is the quest. And so like that's one of the biggest things is just like just we have so much baggage, like so many open loops, and we just once
Yeah.
you clear that, like you can have like your full presence, like your full level of intentionality. It's just a whole different ball game that we play in.
Oh yeah. And those, I like those open loops and the idea of mental bandwidth too. Cause let's say you've got, just to put it in raw numbers, you've got 100% mental bandwidth, and it is a percentage. It's different for everybody. They're absolute raw number perhaps, but we all have 100% that we could
Mm-hmm.
tap into. If you've got
Mm-hmm.
10 open loops and they each eat 2% of your mental bandwidth, you're operating at 80%. If you can close those loops, figure it
Mm-hmm.
out. That's why I love discussing with people their reoccurring dreams, because that helps, I think, to close a loop. That because why is their brain going back to this thing and processing the same scenario over and over again?
Yes.
They need a
Yes.
resolution. They need to close that loop, as you were saying. That's a great. I might steal that from you. I might do
A lot of like
unconsciously.
relationships is like that too. Like if you have like an abusive parent, or maybe like growing up, say for myself, like growing up, my father was very emotionally, physically abusive.
Mm,
And so we could say that like if I have a sister, which I do, that she's attracted to people who are like that, so she can close that loop. And I think it's a very I forget the term for it, but it's a psychological phenomenon where we want to close loops. We
hmm.
want to change the narrative. We want to change the story around it, but we often don't have the tools to do it. So we'll create
Yeah.
these circumstances, these dynamics, so that we can re-experience it and choose different options. And but if we don't have the tool set, if we don't have a higher level of insight or wisdom to get us through that and around that, and to safely mitigate any damage or harm, then we're just going to recreate those problems. So
Yeah.
I think like if you have somebody helping you, like a therapist, relationship coach, or psychologist who's kind of walking, and you kind of have to say it to somebody, and they hear it, and then when you say it to them, then you see, oh, this is pretty ridiculous, isn't it? And they may say nothing, and they don't have to say anything really. And it's just like,
Yeah.
okay, yeah, this is ridiculous.
I think that's what I do with the dream thing too, is that sometimes people are too close to get the proper level of focus on their own experience in that regard. These raw thoughts are just too close. So I kind of stand behind your shoulder and look over it and shine a flashlight in there going, is that what I see there? And then
You've
sometimes
just implanted a seed. Now in my dreams, I'm gonna have you over my shoulder,
with
probably.
with a flashlight, I got your back, man.
Yeah, no, I think that's
It's
gonna happen. I seriously think you just planted a seed. It's gonna
That's
happen. I'll let you
entirely
know if it
possible.
happens.
Well, that's how I conceive of my process, because like there's some people who poo-poo dream interpretation as a scam. as some people being manipulative, or like you go to a psychic and like, oh, the spirits are talking to me, and really you're just using psychology. No, I'm really just using psychology, period. There are no spirits, there's no talking to God, not directly anyway. I hope I am a channel through which the spirit of goodness flows to help other people. Sure.
That's
Oh,
a decision. Yeah,
it is. It
that's a
is. You have to
decision.
open yourself to that energy versus the alternative. I was going somewhere
Hmm.
with that. No, but the idea of none of the answers are in me. I'm not getting anything other than what you give. And all we're doing is looking at it together. And I'm trying to suggest different ways of seeing it. And some of those ways are going to feel right. And some of those ways you're going to feel nothing. And that's fine. That's what we do. So for that feedback, active feedback process. Speaking of the dream thing, though, I know you had a hard out that's coming up in about an hour. So did you want to take a quick break? I'll let the dog out, and we'll come
Yeah,
back in like
let's
10
do
minutes,
that.
and then we'll start the dream stuff. Good
Okay.
deal. I'm gonna go. Benjamin the Dream Wizard wants to help you pierce the veil of night and shine the light of understanding upon the mystery of dreams. Every episode of his Dreamscapes program features real dreamers gifted with rare insight into their nocturnal visions. New Dreamscapes episodes appear every week on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey, and other video hosting platforms, as well as free audiobooks highlighting the psychological principles which inform our dream experience, and much, much more. To join the wizard as a guest, reach out across more than a dozen social media platforms and through the contact page at benjaminthedreamwizard.com, where you will also find the wizard's growing catalog of historical dream literature, available on Amazon, featuring the wisdom and wonder of exploration into the world of dreams over the past 2,000 years. That's Benjamin the Dream Wizard on YouTube and at benjaminthedreamwizard.com. Okay, so once again, the basic process is I shut up and listen. You tell me the dream as a narrative, beginning to end, whatever you remember. Don't worry about being comprehensive with the details and whatnot. Just whatever it is, and then we'll go back through it again, and we'll see if we can figure it out together. So I'm ready when you are.
Okay. Well, there's a couple. So how do I pick?
Oh,
There's like, there's like, there's one that was like, it was a really big moment for me,
mm,
and then there's one like, there's two from last night. But the one that was a really big moment for me, I think that was like 2 years ago, and so I don't remember all the details,
yeah.
but I do remember the thing that happened, and
We
so
we
we can
could
go either way.
always discuss that briefly if you want to, if it's something you don't want to omit. The more recent dreams are usually the best because they're fresh and they speak to something that is a current topic of consideration in a way where it might be,
Hmm.
it's very often more beneficial to focus on those because it's something you're going through now, as opposed to the old
Okay.
dream being something you've probably resolved for the most part, whatever it was. Not always, but
Okay. So maybe just hear your take on the short one, since it's gonna be short, and then go
sure.
into the.
Yeah. Oh, do not walk on my mouse. Jesus. They're gonna erase another episode. No. Okay. Yeah. Let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and talk about that real quick. That's fine.
Okay, so this dream happened about 2 years ago or so, and I was doing something called HRV, resonance breathing, which is like you're just breathing for a certain type of interval so that you can get your brain and your heart to basically resonate at the same frequency,
Mm,
or like operate at the same frequency. And I didn't know at the time, but during week three is generally you're supposed to have some type of emotional release.
mm,
And I didn't read. I just because like they have like this program that you just follow, and so like I didn't read through like the whole book at the time because I was camping and whatever. So in this dream, okay, so backstory real quickly. When I was about 12 or so, I held my baby niece, and that was my first time holding like it was like a week or something old or something, and they had these like four posts wrought iron bed, and I basically when I was holding her, like I knocked her head into the wrought iron post, and I felt, and she was crying, of course, and I just felt so bad that
yeah.
for until now, like until pretty much 2 years ago, I was like, I'm never holding another baby again. Like, just don't trust myself.
Yeah.
And so in this dream, this is before I had met my new uh nephew, but he was just born at this time, like a few weeks old or whatever. But I meet him in this dream. My sister hands him to me, and I have no reluctance to hold him or anything. Like I'm just like, okay, hand. But usually I'm like, no. And so she hands him to me, and as soon as I take him into my hand, I look into his eye, and then my heart, it just bursts open, and like all this, I just I feel like all the tears that I haven't cried, because I haven't cried in a very long time, really, like real crying. And
Hmm.
so like it just like came out, and like, and I felt like I was crying in real life. Like I felt like after I woke up, I was like, I had to check myself, like did I really cry? But it felt so real. And so since that experience happened, a lot of things shifted in my life, and I did finally hold him and everything. Wasn't as magical as the dream, but was still great.
Yeah.
Uh,
Things are always a little more intense in dreams, or not, vice versa. Not exactly aligned with reality one to one.
so yeah, that was the experience. But my therapist, she was like, I have an interpretation if you want to hear it. I'm like, I don't really care for it. So, but I didn't care for her interpretation.
Uh,
I mean, I love her, but I don't know. She's not a dream, person, I think.
Gotcha.
So
A little different
yeah,
specialty, I suppose. I don't have a
yeah.
license. I'm not a licensed psychologist, so to speak. So this is not counseling and therapy. But I think my limited focus, I got something dialed in that actually works. So, and not everyone has that same skill set. Um,
Yeah,
I,
she's more on like the Bernays. No, sorry, not Bernays. What am I thinking? Oh yeah, Bernays, right? Yeah, no, wait,
could be. I think that's an
Bernays.
actual name or close to
No,
one.
I think that's the godfather of propaganda. I think Edward Bernays, so not him.
Oh,
But
could be.
what's
Yeah.
that? What's that lady? She's like known for emotional intelligence. What's her name? Dang.
Oh,
Anyways,
it's on the tip of my tongue. I think I know who you're talking about. Yeah.
Bernice or Brown or something.
Could be Brown. Yeah.
Something.
Could
Anyway,
be.
yeah. So she's more on like that side of things, and so like I'm like, yeah. So anyways, what is your interpretation of this?
Um, you know, this is not my process, but I have thoughts while these things are happening. And there's the theme that stood out to me is the idea of trusting yourself to that the idea of you trusting yourself to handle responsibility well. And you had a traumatic experience, and it isn't earthquake survival, childhood abuse levels of trauma, but it is traumatic enough that you had a intensely negative, memorable experience where there was nobody to blame but yourself, and you internalized that, and you were like, I screwed up so badly that I'm not even going to take the chance of allowing myself to screw up that badly in the future because of how it hurt someone I care about. So this dream was, I think the catharsis of the emotional explosion was, I've changed enough that I can trust I will handle this responsibility better in the future. I can do
Ooh,
this. What do you got?
I love that.
Ah,
It's a very powerful interpretation. I love it. Thank you so much.
yeah. Well, and that is that I would say and the thing that got me really was that heart bursting, wide open emotional catharsis, because it's things that are that important to us, the things that really matter. And letting go of our self-doubt and self-criticism, that is intensely moving. Um, yeah. So that's what really clinched it for me is, that idea of needing to get past that blockage and that euphoric feeling. So I think that's it. And then you proved it to yourself. You've held your nephew. You've not made the same mistake twice. You're more aware of it. Some people, we're a little too hard on ourselves, and learning to let go of that unfair self-criticism, it's such a relief. So
Yeah.
I think that's probably where you were coming from.
Thank you. Yeah,
Mm,
that aligns. I like that a lot.
it feels
Do
right.
you want to get in? Yeah, no, it feels right, but it also feels very helpful, and just kind of noticing the trends that have happened since. I think there has been a lot of ownership of my role in life, and the,
Yeah.
what I'm here to do and stuff. So yeah,
That's a good thing too. It's like getting stuck halfway through the process. First, you have to see there's a problem. Then you got to do something about it. And sometimes we get stuck on that. This is a problem, and that's all we can think of is the problem. And we're not. There's a great sci-fi fantasy series of books, Kumar Borders. called the first book is called The Wizard's First Rule. I love the sci-fi and fantasy, especially genre. And one of the things he advises the elder wizard character advises his nephew, I think, in this sense, or grandnephew, something like that. Or grandson, possibly. I can't remember their relationship. Anyway, he advises him, you're thinking of the problem, not the solution. And puts that in his mind of, quit dwelling here. Where do we go? What's the next step? We got to figure this out. And that always stuck with me. That too. I read that, some 15, 20 years ago. I'm like, yeah, if I'm stuck on something, maybe I'm thinking of the problem. I'm dwelling on the problem and I'm not looking at what can I do about it. And some people are scared to try things, especially if the problem is self-doubt. Oh God, how do I make a decision about how to fix my own self-doubt? I'm so doubtful. Oh no. And that's when it can help to go to a therapist or talk to a friend, anyone who can help you talk through that and be that mirror for you. Yeah. But I'm eating more of your time with my random ramblings. So you said there were 2 dreams you had last night. Does either one of them feel like, does it shine brighter in your mind of like, this was more important? This felt like I need an answer.
I think I only wrote down one. So
fair enough. That makes it easier too. Just no need to flip a coin. Let me put this here. Okay. Go for it.
A lot of my dreams happen in class for some reason. So like it could be middle school, it could be high school, it could be not really college, but a lot of them happen in class. And this person, he was chasing me, I guess we were having like an outdoors type of class. And so then we'd fight. I fight a lot in my dreams. And then I'd take him out and not kill him, but I just, I guess defeat him. And then he'd keep finding me at different places and throughout the school or different, even like outside of the context of school. And then one time he found me and he started flinging forks at me. And this is also a common theme where people fling forks at each other, but they're like throwing knives. And so they'll stick in you. And so like I was able to like dodge and block them so that they wouldn't stick, like kind of just deflect them. And then I threw some back and stuck them. But yeah, it's kind of a weird. Every time I have that part of my dream, I'm like, oh, why forks? But it just, it's so cruel, unnecessarily cruel. Then we had like a ultimate fight, I guess, and then that's when I guess I really took him out, and then I had to call 911 to help him. And after he woke up on the street, he tried to fight me again, and then this time I was just basically using a lot of misdirection instead of like hitting him because he wasn't in a fighting shape really. And then after like he got tired, then we just like walked up the stairwell and then he started telling me his life story. And that's how the dream ended.
Okay. Very interesting. That went to about, where is it, 148. Getting better at doing this timestamp thing because I got to go back through these videos and find. I chop out the you describing the dream, that becomes its own video. I put it on my What Dreams May Come playlist so people can go, let me find a dream I'm interested in. What is a mystery I want to hear solved? And then they can listen to that 3-minute, 90-second description of a dream and go, I want to know what that one means. And then corresponding episode. It's also how I turn one interview into a week's worth of social media notifications. Keep my presence out there. It's all that multitasking thing. Like,
nice,
right?
Like
there you go. It's like the Joe Rogan clip style. And I just started making YouTube shorts recently too, and those are actually getting several hundred views. Yeah,
lots of exposure.
I don't think I'm ever going to get one that goes 1 million views viral, but I'm not going to complain if it does.
If you have an interesting enough story, I'm sure, or a dream, I'm sure it could.
Right?
Anything's possible.
Oh, for sure. I'm not going to discount it or work to ensure it never happens.
For it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I think that'll help. I do. Okay, so we got the basic story. And this, I think, is key to the psychological process in general. I mean, what is my process? Hell if I know. I just fell into this. I intuited this whole thing, and that's what I run with. I'm like, I'm not even going to try and figure it out until in retrospect it starts to make sense to me. But I'm starting to get some explanations for it. Step one, you got to listen. You got to really just listen and get as many of the details as you can. Really hear what the other person's saying. Now is the time to go back through it again and look at it. Okay, now I can ask my questions. You don't interrupt the process of just listening. Just get it. Just see it for what it is. So you actually, this is in the style of some other reoccurring dreams where you tend to fight people or fight in general, or did I have that wrong in terms of a lot of dreams just take place in school, but they're not all about fights? This one just happened to be about fights.
A lot of them happen in schools, and oftentimes I'm fighting, but they don't usually. I'm not usually fighting at school. I don't think. I'm usually just fighting in general, just random places.
Gotcha. But the first thing is that it takes place adjacent to a school, near a school. It is
It's like an outdoor, like like how in Oregon there's a lot of indoor, or like you watch Saved by the Bell. It's all indoor schools,
Yeah.
but there's some outdoor schools, and so it's like an outdoor school, but it was outside of a classroom, say for instance, but on campus.
Yeah. So in this one specifically, you were near a classroom. You were in a quad area. You were out more towards the field where
something like
people would
that.
play kickball.
Kickball.
Right? Dodgeball, kickball. So say just, and did it feel like any particular level, elementary school, middle school, college?
Middle school. But I think we're all adults, which is pretty common too. I'll be in a different, like I'll be in elementary or middle, or not often high school, not often college, but sometimes.
Gotcha.
But I'll always be an adult, and everybody's an adult, but there's no
Yeah.
reason we're there.
Fair enough. Yeah. No, it's definitely, so a lot of times the setting that it's in, well, almost always the setting that it's in means something. Like you didn't set yourself at a medieval castle. You weren't on a space station. I mean, so it's telling you there's something about your experience at the time when you were actually in that environment that is now also relevant to when you're an adult. But you're not in the classroom, but it's something, say, education adjacent, or something to do with the way you conceive of school in general. It seems to have been if it's going to come back as a common theme in multiple dreams, there's experiences from that time and the way you conceptualize it that stay with you. And I think that's true for a lot of people in terms of, we look back at our growing up in general. I mean, if you grew up in the country and you had a little ramshackle one-room schoolhouse in the 1800s or whatever, that's going to be your representation of school. So if you have strong connections with that, you learned important lessons, things that you believe are still relevant to your life, that's what you're going to see. But what you see is more like your actual experience. It's a different kind of outdoor school type of thing where the buildings are maybe in L shapes, and in between them is not a cover because it rains all the time, but for sunshine and trees and whatnot. I had the same kind of school actually when I was in elementary schools in kind of the broader Sacramento, California area. So
I'm from Sacramento.
Oh my goodness, that's pretty cool. You might have actually let's see, I'm 46. Is it okay to say how old you are? Or
Yeah, I'm 34.
So we actually lived within the same area at an overlapping period in our life. I mean, probably never would have met, and not within miles, but I was still living there when you were born. And then moved to Southern Oregon, etc.
I was born in Hawaii, but I lived there since I was like 1, pretty much.
Fair enough. Yeah, but our time in that area overlapped. We were in greater proximity than we are now at one point, which is weird. That's another great synchronicity.
Is it weird, though?
Well, it's weird in like, of course we did type of way, which is weirder. So anyway, this is where I start with things. And sometimes I need to ramble on that stuff, saying, okay, there's something about this context that then informs the rest of the story. We don't have to get that right now. But we start letting it percolate, as I say, like a brewing coffee. It's just drops through the grains. So you're in a fight with a person. Do you know how it started, or who started it in that regard?
No, I think he was pursuing me, and then I had to basically confront him, and then that's how it started. I'm not 100% clear on the details, but my intuition is saying that.
And that's okay. If in dreams, you don't have to have I saw him come up to me and say insulting things, and then he threw the first punch. That's one type of experience. The other type is he was chasing me and I couldn't get away from this confrontation. It was going to happen, and I just know that exactly the same thing as seeing it. Um, so this is definitely a confrontation not of your choosing. This is something, or maybe even someone, but I think less likely a specific person. I think the guy
Mhm.
represents more an idea of something that is pursuing
Mhm.
you and that you have to confront. You're going to have to battle this thing. It's going to keep chasing you and forcing you into combat, whether you like it or not. And despite your efforts to say run away from it, we're getting something there that feels really. I don't know. Is that
Yeah, yeah,
okay?
no.
That sometimes I get zings and I'm like, whoa, that's got to be it. There's got to be something there. But again, just a flashlight. So what if we look at it this way? You're like, okay, okay, I'm with you. Um, so you have multiple instances of defeating this opponent that will not stay down. And it goes from different place to different place. So the first one is say outside these schoolrooms, and
Yeah.
then you defeat them, you win, and you leave, you disengage. And where does the next confrontation happen? What environment?
I think the kitchen, the cafeteria.
Interesting. Um, and that is where the fork incident happened.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's a natural place for forks to be. I mean, you would say what kind of weapons would be available? Forks. He's throwing forks at me, but you've had forks thrown at you in other dreams.
Yeah, and it's I've had forks in the eyeball. I've forked other people in the eyeball. It's been pretty crazy.
Do you have any strong association with forks in general? Here's the
I don't
thing.
think so.
Well, here's the thing. Culturally, were you raised in a household where you use chopsticks? And actually, forks is very much a
Yeah.
Western thing that you had to kind of learn later, or
Mm.
you had to learn to use both.
I think we learned to use both simultaneously, probably.
Yeah, because that's the first thing that came to my mind in terms of why this specific utensil. Okay, it's common, say, in Western kitchens. That's the very Western and European thing. Not entirely common around the world. Say, if we went down to uh, Mexico, and a lot of their meals are going to be you have a stack of tortillas and you got a bowl of beans, and they don't even use utensils. They just take it and kind of scoop with the stuff and then sprinkle it in and make a hand taco. That's more
Yeah.
like a spread. You'd so that there's always cultural differences in this thing too. And I thought at least I would ask if there was a resonance in that cultural angle of fork versus chops. And now there's no chopsticks in the dream, but forks being very different culturally. I don't know if there's anything there that comes to mind, or I'm on the wrong track completely.
No, I think just forks are sharp and I mean they're not really sharp, but
They're very
I think
stabby.
they're yeah, they're just stabby. So I think I mean I don't know. It's often that people are just kind of just like flinging the forks and not super often, but more often than knives or other implements for
Yeah.
some reason. So it would just triggered me in this dream. I was like, why forks again? Like,
Yeah, definitely.
yeah,
So there's probably, I mean, I would say definitely because it recurs and it is always forks. There's something strongly related to forks. Do you remember having been stabbed with a fork or stabbing someone with a fork as a kid? I mean, in a fight or a dispute with a sibling, and you just frustratedly lashed out and poked them with a fork and they cried, or anything strong like that from your history, like something with
I don't think
forks.
there's any history of violence with forks. I don't think
Gotcha. Okay.
in my conscious recollection at this moment.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. So we're ruling things out. It's not necessarily say a cultural angle. It's not necessarily a literal connection angle. We might not figure out forks. That might be deep, whatever that is. Yeah, and that's okay. Where there's no pressure on you, and I can only do what I can do. I'm going to think back on this and wonder why didn't I suggest something better or different. But we can actually let it slide for a minute and see if we can come back around to it. Circle back, as some people would say.
Yeah.
But there was it is in some sense also an escalation. There was fisticuffs, and now there's weapons involved, and they're being thrown. And the purpose is it's not just to bruise you, but like to pierce your skin. It's that's the nature of the object. and you are successfully dodging and deflecting. I mean, none of them actually make contact and stick.
None of them stick. Yeah, none of
Okay.
them stick.
So if we conceptualize this as some kind of a recurrent conflict that you can't avoid for whatever reason, and it's escalated now to weapons, but you're still, you defeated him the first time, you successfully resolved that. Now, even though there's an adapted attack method, there's a new variation of attack thrown in, you're also successfully using your skills to dodge, deflect, and you're not being injured in that way. So it's another, maybe like, as I was saying, the idea of adaptive means of also achieving success. You didn't show yourself you failing, like, oh no, this new vector of attack actually broke through my defenses. No, my defenses are good against this too. Um,
Impervious to forks.
right? You get a +3 bonus versus forks. Exactly. It coming from your dexterity. How did that situation resolve? Was this person, where were you at physically in relation to them as that was happening? Had you sat down to eat, or did you walk in and they were waiting for you? What do you remember of the kind of physical layout of that encounter?
I think I had some food, and then I turned around and they were there, and we were maybe 5 or 6 feet away from each other, and that's why they had to throw those forks. But they had like a bunch of forks, and then they were just kind of just flinging them at me.
Okay. It's interesting too. So you moved from outside a place of education in a way, a low level of, but a fundamental, necessary, but necessarily low level of rising through it. And now you've moved to the cafeteria, which is, it's still in the school. So in the context of the school, but it's a different experience of school. This is where you're actually taking a break from the education part. This is now the social environment. It's a place where you meet basic biological needs. Everybody got to eat. It's also a place where you'd hope you could just relax and be like, I'm not under pressure to do anything but meet my own needs here. I'm just here to eat and take a break before maybe heading back to whatever else I'm doing. So there's maybe some different contexts for how this thing is following you to different areas of your life and impacting you there too. Something like that.
Yeah, definitely something unavoidable, I guess, regardless of the schema.
Yeah. Yeah. Something like that. And it may be something specific to the cafeteria experience too. But again, but we move up levels of broad generalization. What's a place to eat food? No, what's a kind of larger building, and a lot of different layers to look at it there. But that may not be as relevant as just showing different environments that the problem crosses over into.
Yeah, good way
And
of putting it.
thank you. Where did you experience the next ultimate fight?
I think this one was on the street, if I can remember, in front of somebody's house or something like that, in a neighborhood setting.
Okay.
Or maybe just outside of a neighborhood setting, but there were houses around.
Yeah. And did this map onto your what am I trying to say? The neighborhood you lived in when you were in middle school? Is it more like suburban, urban, or something different than you experienced?
I think it was similar.
Okay.
Similar. Not exactly, but similar.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be identical, but definitely if it was, you grew up like you grew up in the country in a one-room schoolhouse, but suddenly you're imagining you're in a dense city schoolhouse and a very urban street, tall buildings everywhere, completely different experience. That would be drawn from representations that you might have seen in media rather than personal experience, and conceptualizing it differently in that way.
I see. Yeah, it's cool that you have all this different ways to slice the onion.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Is like, what if we look at it from this angle? That's why I say I'm shining the light around in the dark. What is this thing? What if we turn it this way? Rubik's cube. Okay, I don't want to lose that. These are my notes. Were you walking alone? Were you walking? Were you just suddenly in the fight and there's no context for how it started? For this kind of.
I think it was just in the fight. Yeah, it just there wasn't a lot of transition before from what I recall.
Is there anything you remember seeing around you? You're on the sidewalk, you're in the street, you're on someone's front lawn.
I think we're in the street, and there might have been people around, but I don't remember. Yeah, I think when I called 911, there were people around. So,
But you don't remember that explicitly during the fight.
no.
Okay, that might be relevant, might not. It might be relevant, it might not. I did have a thing that afterward, it being relevant afterwards is I think, but we'll see. It also brought immediately to my mind is street fighting. I mean, you're in the street fighting, so and what is a street fight? It's a very I think you feel something there. It's a very specific kind of fight. It's not like this is not just kids messing around. This is maybe life or death. And that's, you kind of characterize it as an ultimate fight in terms of how knockdown, drag out, brutal it was, like cage, UFC cage fighting, and someone's going down.
Yeah.
And it felt that way. It felt more brutal than the first brawl, and it wasn't as easy to deflect as the Forks. This was, you were trading blows, you were getting hit and giving and taking.
Yeah, I mean more yeah, I mean I wasn't like taking a lot, I think. But
He
I
landed
mean I was
some.
taking some, but
Okay.
but yeah, it was more of a in your face, more dramatic, more intense than the first two.
Yeah, and it is interesting that this is say the, well, it isn't the final. There was another one after that as well. So you're putting in more effort. You're having to put in more effort. The intensity of it in general escalated. The intensity of the attack, therefore the necessity of the defense to be equal to the task, or if you're going to win, superior to the task. Do you remember any specific method of ending the fight? Some particular maneuver was, a wild haymaker catches him on the chin. You sweep the leg and you're able to get him in a headlock. Things like that.
I can't say that I remember.
Fair
There's
enough.
probably something, but I don't remember.
Well, also there might have been nothing. It might be like what you needed to experience was the intensity of it and how serious it was, and the idea that this is a different kind of challenge to meet, and you still succeeded. So
I think they were bleeding and unconscious when I had to call 911. So
yeah,
I
that was
probably
gonna.
didn't break any limbs, but they were bleeding, so there's some bludgeoning and they were unconscious. So they were knocked unconscious, or they were choked into
Yeah,
unconsciousness.
and that's probably the more important element of it is level the level of intensity demanded a certain amount of response, and to win a fight like that, the other person's going to be in bad shape, and so you needed to show yourself. Here's the consequences. If you win, whatever you're winning against is going to be defeated in this type of tangible way. That's not what I'm trying to say. There's going to be an escalated level of damage that is just necessary to win. Something about that. Sometimes I just need to say things, and rather than curb stomping, rather than walking around to the crowd with your arms up, roaring your victory, you have a concern for this person, this thing that has been brutally defeated. You don't want them to die. You don't want them to have to suffer the ultimate cost of losing their life because they made the mistake of messing with you. You're gonna, and I wrote down just kind, no desire to harm. That was my first thing. That's the impression I was getting from that. So, you still have enough compassion for this person that started the fight, that you don't really want to see them suffer too badly for their mistake.
Yeah, totally.
And that's what it felt like in the dream to you, that this natural tendency to compassion.
Yeah, and also a duty, I think. So, I mean, there's compassion that I don't want it to be worse than what it is, but I think also, I guess, on the other end of uh, what I had done, just the responsibility to make sure that the responsibility and duty to make sure that he was at least cared for in some way.
Yeah, and that's a good distinction, because there are some people who they lean into the emotional side. I felt bad for him, and that was my motivation. You corrected me a little bit to say no, it was more like an obligation. And obligations are more intellectual, moral than emotional. They might get us to the same place, but they are two different ways of approaching that problem. So there was an acknowledgement of responsibility. I did this, so I'm going to be responsible in how I respond to what I have done, even if it was justified. And that, I think a lot of us do look from that angle. Like, do I have to let it be as bad as it could be, or can I mitigate it? Should I, what does it mean to be responsible? And certainly in this discrete instance, what it means to be responsible is you call them an ambulance. You don't let them die. When you realized there were other people around, what was their response? What were they doing? Were they near, close? Were they horrified?
I think they were there to just witness. There wasn't really a lot of response or interaction with them. I think part of why I felt like I needed to call was because there was people around, and that was the right thing to do.
Oh yeah.
Not because like I wanted to get ahead of the narrative
Yeah.
particularly, but I think just in general to do the right thing, especially if there's other people around, I guess.
No, for sure. And that is no small potatoes in terms of motivation. There are people who, okay, what do they say? Character is what you do when no one's looking, or when people can't do anything for you. You know, it's how you treat people that when no one's looking, and people that how you treat people who can't do anything for you. But that doesn't mean that public perception will not happen one way or another. So if there are people present acting through the enacting responsibility, will be hopefully positively received by people who, yeah, they would expect that. Even if that wasn't your motivation, it's like your motivations are separate from the perception, but the perception is going to happen anyway, no matter what your motivation is. There's two separate things that are both related to the same subject. So there is that idea of not, I'm not suggesting, and I don't think it is the case, that you only did that because of the public perception, but you did the right thing, and there were people there to witness it, is more like it. Did you watch the remake of Mad Max? Witness me! Like, people want to be seen doing things that are heroic. And I love the hero moment in Spider-Man 2, I think it was, the old Tobey Maguire one, where he stops the train by shooting out all the webs, and he's about to collapse exhausted, and they catch him and they bring him in and they pass him hand over hand and they lay him down. And one guy says, I got a kid his age. And then the little boy brings him the mask and says, here, Spider-Man. And I lose it every time. I'm getting chills right now describing that scene. I want that kind of public approval, not for the narcissistic sake of gimme, I want to feel good, but like I really did something important and somebody saw it and they appreciate it. So I think that's what you're leaning into here.
Definitely. I think that's right along the same vein. You're right on the money.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's what I feel that resonance with you on that level. But did the ambulance ever arrive? Did he get treatment?
No,
he got it before that. Okay. What were you doing when he came back after you again? Were you interacting with the people at all? Or did he come at you from behind, or did you watch him get off the ground and like, oh, here we go again?
Yeah, it was more like I saw him get off the ground, like, here we go again. I don't know why there was distance between us. But yeah, I think he gets up and he just tries to come at me some more.
And you, again, adjust your response to the needs of the situation. You say, look, I don't have to decapitate this guy. I can just he can't really hurt me, so I'm going to go easy on him. It's kind of the idea.
Yeah, just misdirecting and dodging and just letting him burn himself out, basically.
Any any specifics of that scenario that stand out to you in terms of describing how it played out, or was it just extremely brief?
Yeah, it was somewhat brief before he pretty much ran out of energy and collapsed.
Okay. And then was it a sudden scene change again to after he collapsed, now you're walking up a set of stairs with him?
Yeah,
Okay.
scene change, and we're in an internal stairwell. We're just going up together,
What
and
kind of building?
it's almost like in a side of an apartment complex or something, maybe.
And this would be one of the outdoor stairwells for an apartment complex in terms of
Internal.
it. No, well,
Internal
that's right. You
interior.
did say interior. So almost like a multi-story building where the staircase is on the inside. Any
Yeah.
idea of where you were? Ground floor, higher up?
Well, we're probably at least above the first level because there was a continuation from lower and then to the next loop around.
Okay. So your impression was generally at a lower level of the building with multiple levels perhaps remaining to climb if you were to go to the top?
Yeah.
Okay. That very much suggests the beginning of a process in a way. You didn't put yourself at the ninth story of a 10-story building, which would more represent the end of a process. I'm pretty close to the goal. You're very much showing yourself, I'm just starting the climb with this person. I think that the fact that they are with you and telling you their life story is the purpose of putting yourself at a low rung on a set of stairs, that there's a long way to go in terms of that.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Where were you guys in relation to each other? Shoulder by shoulder? Were they slightly behind and to the left, or
Shoulder to shoulder. I think I might have been holding him up or something like that,
assisting the climb? Gotcha.
like with his arm around me or something.
And he's still out of sorts and not in good shape.
Yeah, I mean, there's still like blood and stuff, but he can tell me the story in a very coherent way.
Gotcha. And is there anything you remember about the story, or just that is what he was saying?
There were definitely details that I don't remember.
Okay. Do you remember how it came to be? I mean, did you ask him or did he volunteer?
I don't remember how it came to be.
Gotcha. I think it's probably more important that you are with this person, with this concept and what it represents at the beginning of a journey of understanding, because what you are learning from him is his life story. How did he get where he's at? And that's almost the same as explaining the nature of a thing. And when you're beginning to understand the nature of a thing, you're at the beginning of a journey of perhaps many steps to take you up to the top of peak of understanding in a way. That's an interesting story arc from the beginning of fighting this thing you can't get away from that keeps coming back in different forms, follows you, to the point of, in the neighborhood perhaps where you live. It's close to home. It's not in your house. Never got into your house, but it's at least as close as the street in front of your house, and you have to street fight, engage with it brutally. And even though you win, you don't want to destroy it utterly. So you caretake it. And then the next thing is, and it comes back again. Okay, now I need to understand this thing. What is it? Tell me your story. Why are you here? If I tell it like that, and something going on in your current situation, your current life experience, relationships, business projects, I don't know if anything comes to mind, a recurrent struggle of that kind.
Well, I think along the arc of what we were talking about in the first stream of just like acceptance of responsibility, and then where we're at right now, I guess where I'm at right now in my his career is, I've been a serial entrepreneur just for the sake of making money, and now I'm for the first time ever in a service-oriented business that I've created. So it's just a completely different setup. Like I am. It's not about. I mean, I need to make money, It's not about selling widgets for money. It's not about just min-maxing that whole deal.
Yeah.
So it's more about like, hey, this is one of my gifts, from that dream that I had about the baby crying. It's like after that dream, I realized that I had been repressing my emotional side, my emotionally sensitive side, and because one of my best friends growing up, he was autistic, and so he would always be like, "Why are you so affected by what's happening around us?" Like, well, obviously he has Asperger's, so it's like he has zero effect.
Me too.
So,
Yeah.
so
I feel that.
and so I was like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be, But I think there was always a part of myself that I grew up very stoic, so very
Yeah.
military, very stoic. So I didn't really want to allow things to affect me, and I think I had always been repressing this emotional aspect of myself. And
Yeah.
like I think one of my the second sign I have is like a moon or something, so it's like very emotional. So it's like I just have this highly repressed emotional aspect, and then I think 2 years ago I came to witness and acknowledge that in the dream, but also in a series of dreams that happened after that. And I was like, why am I getting in the way of this thing? Like it's such a gift to understand people emotionally, and to understand myself emotionally. And so that's what led me to this path that I'm at now. It's like, why don't I use all the IQ that I have, all the business knowledge, all the wisdom, plus all the EQ that I have to like help people? Because I think like on a first principle basis,
Yeah.
for us to innovate, for us to like evolve technologically, and to outgrow the problems that we face, that we've sort of created, there needs to be the conditions for that, and part of those conditions are safety, trust, and compassion, connection. So
Yeah.
what my mission is to foster the mindsets, the ideals, the principles behind that, so that we can have that space, that necessary foundation, so that we can have innovation where
Yeah.
creativity can excel. And so that's been a big part of my my life right now. And so although I've done business before, I've never done business like this before. And
Yeah.
so it's been, I think, always, like this theme of like avoiding or repressing that emotional aspect. Maybe that thing is like could be something continually confronting me, but I'm always just like, I don't want to deal with emotions. I'm very
Sure.
logical. I'm super logical. Like
Me too. Yeah.
there's so much logic in here. It's crazy. But it's like understanding that there's both sides. There's just two sides of the same coin.
For sure.
And I think I'm left-handed, so I had to learn a lot of the ways of how to live in a right-handed person's world.
Yeah.
And so I think the mirror side of this is like I've also been, since I was young, like just touted for being very logical, very smart, but it's like that allowed me to lean on that, but ignore my emotional part. So now I have to
Yeah.
learn how to be an emotional being in a
Yeah.
highly logical world. So
Something
I
we
think those
cannot
are these
ignore.
themes that are
It's
coming.
gonna happen. We're going to have feelings. We got to figure out what to do with them, which actually was leaning me towards some of what you were saying. So you're shifting your focus from a widget oriented, very physical, numbers on paper type of thing. And there's people involved in production and whatnot, but it isn't about that, to something where it is about that. It's very much about the success of your business is, and it isn't just the business, it's the success of yourself, the success of your chosen enterprise now relies more heavily on people. That keyed something in to me on this, where it is unavoidable with some people that there will be conflict. And now this doesn't mean you're going to butt heads with people, but there is an unavoidable element of dealing with people where there will be differences of opinion, perspective, and what you're trying to do is confront those challenges to communication, to successfully implementing your business. You're trying to negotiate those where you defeat the challenge without destroying the person. You're not there to kill anybody. You're not, you could defeat them physically. You could beat the hell out of them probably, but that's not the point, and that's not a win either.
Yeah,
So
it's not
what you're going through is I'm going to keep running up against conflict of different kinds, and it's healthy and natural and unavoidable in a lot of ways, but it's going to happen. You got to navigate it gently to get to a point, and then probably you're like, how do I figure this out? Okay, let me start learning your story. How do I negotiate with you to get what we both want out of this? And that leans a little more heavily on that out of your element emotional side, like taking people's emotions seriously, because you can't help it. You can't tell someone you're being irrational. Stop it. They're going to go, fuck you. I'll talk to somebody else. Right. So
Yeah,
this is a
exactly.
challenge you're going to get. So that's, I mean, I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that seems to make sense to me. I don't know.
Yeah, that
You
makes
got
a
to
lot of
feel it.
sense. I like it. I like it a lot. Yeah, it's very helpful. Because I think that that theme is actually happening in a lot of different areas of my life. From my relationship with my, partner to my relationship with my parents. So yeah, it's happening throughout a lot of different relationships in my life.
I think this is one of the few dreams I have come across, and there's been others, but where the answer is explicit. It's like part of the dream. Tell me your life story. Let me understand you, how you got here from wherever. That how you got here is going to let me know where we can go together, and maybe what other challenges you have to overcome for us to move forward, or how I need to adapt my fighting style to accomplish the mission in a way, yeah, like I said, that doesn't destroy the person, because that's not a win either. You can't just kill them and walk away with the money. That's a different kind of business. Yeah, right. That's and so wow. I mean, I'm just blown away by this idea that you suggested the answer to yourself in the dream, and I think it's spot on. Not a lot of dreams have that explicit message. Very much they leave you with open questions, but if you're willing to listen to someone's life story, you're at the beginning of helping them up the stairs from their damaged position. Whoa, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna stop right there.
Mic drop right there.
No, I felt it too. I'm like, wow, I can't believe I just said that. I think that's it. I mean, I'm rarely this absolutely certain, but and don't take my word for it. It's got to make
Yeah,
sense to you, and it's got to be something you can implement. But I hope that's I hope that's what it means, and that moves you closer to your goal. That's yeah,
I think so. I think so. It's really lovely actually because I am, just the only other thing I could describe myself as a student of life, very, very serious
yeah,
student of life, and I'm always wanting to learn, always wanting to open up to what life is sharing with me, what life is showing me, what life is reflecting to me. And I think it's represented in this dream, and you really, and I think to know that I guess I'm in alignment with my subconscious in that way where it's being reflected at that level
yeah.
of awareness is it feels right, and it feels right and nice.
Yeah, I think it's well. I don't always aim towards giving people a happy story. I aim towards giving them the truth. But a lot of these things I think are, um, the truth is in a way neutral. You can decide what you want to do with it. But this is definitely a case where you asked yourself a question: Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing this the right way? And your answer was, I can see a right way to do it, and that aligns with me personally. And it takes you back to, if you say you're someone who enjoys learning, our earliest representations of learning are often bound up with the concept of school. This is where I learn things, and so
Yeah,
it's not at all out of alignment for people to say anytime I need to learn something new, it's going to remind me of being in school again, because that's the place where learning happens. So that's and being such an icon. That's one reason anime does so many stories set in schools. It's like, well, everyone had this experience. We had classrooms and people and teachers and relationships, and it's speaking to that commonality of that area of life.
oh, that's a good point. I never thought about that. That's a really good point.
Yep. I I mean, my personal opinion, I think that's what they're doing, but opinions vary on that. I love the analysis of stories, and so I'm not always very good at it, but some key elements, just in passing, just the idea of the harem anime. I think that's greatly misunderstood. I don't think that's a male power fantasy. I think it's a male responsibility fantasy.
It
it's
is.
it's
I agree with you.
it satisfies both. My thing is like, why do all these girls fall in love with you? Well, if it's done right, if it's not just constructed, plot
The
armor and
art of
what.
seduction.
Yeah, well, if it's done right, why do all these girls fall in love with the guy? Because he's a good guy, and that makes me. I don't know if you ever watched Bakemonogatari, that series. I would recommend. Okay, you want an emotional roller coaster? Watch that one. You got to find the right order to watch it in, and you got to watch the movie before you watch the final season. Long story
like
short,
a movie before final season. Okay.
right? And you'll find you'll find the chronological, and it's pretty much the way you should watch the series. It's a bit. There's a bit of etchy fan service in there. You know, some cute girls, not entirely as dressed as they would be modestly. That said, he's a good guy. And what he does is he finds these damaged women or young girls are drawn to his goodness, and he treats them respectfully and kindly and caringly and helps them solve their emotional damage. And of course, they all fall in love with him. And he doesn't
do in real life.
And he doesn't take advantage of any of them except
that's what I do in real life.
He does fall in love with one and commits to her. Brilliant, beautiful series. I mean, I could go on and on about it. No wonder it's tremendously popular.
You have to write that out to me.
Yeah.
So I can find it. But
Bakemonogatari.
that's how before I decided to actually have a partner, like that's pretty much what my life was. I had lots of female friends. And I was just always, I don't really try to cross boundaries. I just wasn't like, I just didn't want to do that. But it's very interesting.
It's nice when you don't have to hold back, but it's just like, no, you really are just a friend. I'm not pretending that to get in your pants. And that also means I don't want anything else from you but your health and happiness, and I can focus on that without a conflicting interest. That's a tremendous
the conflict of interest.
Tremendous position of strength to be coming from to do the most good. Yeah. Well, I think we're going to get you out of here just about on time. I think it's 3:00 our mutual Pacific time zone. So if you feel like we got a good enough answer, you don't have more questions, we'll wrap it up.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's wrap it up.
All right, good deal. Well then, for everyone out there listening, thanks for watching. This has been our friend Tim Bowie from LA, California. He is a life mastery coach. You can find him at timdinbowie.com/high performance humans, Instagram.com/timdinbowie. All of these spelled out in the description below because I wouldn't be able to do it without writing it down myself. And for my part, please like, share, subscribe, tell your friends. Always need more volunteer dreamers. You can see I'll talk to anybody. We have a great conversation. 16 currently available works of historical dream literature. Book 16, Dreams and Their Meanings by Horace G. Hutchinson from 1901. Great conversations by correspondence with his readership. All this and more at BenjaminTheDreamWizard.com. All 16 works of historical dream literature, encyclopedia, MP3 downloads of these dream interpretation interviews. And that's my shilling. I'll just say, Tim, it's been good talking to you.
No, it's really been a pleasure. This is actually my first podcast, and I'm really glad we connected.
Oh, wow. I'm glad I could set the tone for what I hope comes for you. That as people, this will be this engaging and interesting. Then again, I'm probably special, and I choose to believe
You're
that.
pretty special, yeah.
He says, don't applaud, just throw money. Okay, and I'll say, everybody out there, thanks for watching.